Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution, and the Greek freaks, the Boule. They have embarrassed us and shamed us once again. Before we get into that, let's be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, we don't want to, say we got all the evidence on old Smokey. But it's just always been something about Smokey I didn't really trust. What's going on with this? What they saying is a pervert. Let's get into the content.
How y'all doing today? Well, baby, if you name it Smokey Robinson, what is going on? I don't like this timeline. What's going on? How did we have all that stuff with Sean Diddy Combs and now everybody stepped forward saying, you know what? Me. Y'all, let's get into this. Smokey Robinson, if you guys don't know, has been accused of rape by 4 housekeepers. 4 former housekeepers. What in the world? Listen, I will say one thing. When I first read the headline, this should be shocking, but it isn't. Google Smokey's last album. I literally was like, when you turn 80, there's something that happens in a man's mind that makes him think, feel, I don't know, is it lack because maybe you're not doing it as much? I just know I heard that album and I was like, I don't like the way this make me bad touch. That's all I heard. Anyway, y'all, let's get into this. Smokey Robinson has been sued for sexual battery by 4 former housekeepers. I'll try to go live later on tonight or tomorrow to read the stuff. Man, they said he's being sued by 4 women who say they used to work for him, claiming he repeatedly SA'd them and raped them during their employment. Now, here's the weird thing. You have a wife living at home. So is this like some Bill and Camille Cosby stuff where the wife knows what's going on, but she thinks you just like what is going on? Anyway, right? The suit was filed in Los Angeles Tuesday morning by 4 Jane Does claiming they used to work as housekeepers for the music star and his wife, Frances Gladney Robinson. Let me skip through this. This better not be a Busby special. The 4 accusers, who say they overlapped while they were working for Smokey and Frances, claimed they were assaulted multiple times, with the first alleged incidents occurring in 2007. While there are a variety of allegations made against Smokey in the document, there is some consistency among the Jane Does, with all of them claiming Smokey would call them into his bedroom or other places while his wife was away from the house. Okay, that explains where the wife was. These women alleged Smokey would then force himself upon them, penetrating with his forcibly giving them blankety blank and making them perform sloppy toppy on him, and then raping them despite claiming they repeatedly told him no. The women claim Smokey would sometimes lay down a towel before allegedly forcing himself upon them, so not as to make a mess on the bed linens. At least 2 of the victims claim he did something inside of him without using protection. They're suing Smokey for sexual battery, assault, false imprisonment, and gender violence. And they want at least $50 million in damages. Smokey's wife of 23 years is also included in the suit, though the women are clear she never engaged in any of the alleged SAs or alleged Rs. Instead, they're suing Frances because they say she knew about prior alleged sexual misconduct that he had committed and did nothing to prevent it from happening again. They also claim she created a hostile work environment by using.
But what we hearing so far? Now, we don't go for all this taking the goodies from the women and all this perversion that the Greek freaks been doing, but it sounds like those women over there, trying to entice those Smokey. Then Smokey got into a sexual relationship with him. Now they finna hit him across his head, and his wife lets him, so these housekeeper things in Hollywood, housekeepers are really play toys for the rich, and the women. Sometimes the women be in on it, and sometimes the women have the gardeners is for them. That shit, that is real. The milkman for them. That type of shit. That's real talk. Smokey seemed like he got caught up a little too horny, old men, a little 200. But I don't see Smokey give me that. I don't know. But I don't know. We're gonna see. I don't know. It seemed like they got old Smokey. You know, they enticed him. He couldn't. You know, he old. They walk around the house bending over and all that type of old shit. No, Smokey couldn't handle himself.
Using racially charged epithets, giving them arduous tasks, and depriving them of meals and rest breaks. What? Wait, I'm confused. Okay, so I'm confused, right? So if she used racial epithets, I'm guessing they're not Black, but there were 4 housekeepers and they all knew each other, and he did that to all of them, and none of them went to the police. None of them fought. And listen, I'm not
crazy
defending Smokey. I'm literally asking because I don't see anything about charges being being filed. I do know that the wife would have had to, I think that the wife would have had to know something, because how does all this get done without anybody knowing? And how did 4 housekeepers all get there, and the wife racially abused them and knew about it but didn't say anything? And how did they all link up? How did they find each other, and how did they know? Or were they all working there at the same time? Smokey Robinson's rich. He has a mansion. And they're all suing at the same time. Here's the thing. Smokey Robinson is 85 years old. Was an 85-year-old really holding anybody down, enforcing anything on anyone? He is 85 years old. I don't care how good he can sing. I don't care how good he can do a 2-step. How bad could an 85-year-old, even though, let me be real, do y'all think it's a situation where they really needed the money? Because she said she's using racial epithets. What if they were immigrant? You know, what if they were like their papers weren't right? What if they really needed this to support themselves? So they had to put up.
Oh man, why they didn't sue Arnold Schwarzenegger? See? Arnold had a baby with his maid, looked just like him. That ruined his marriage. But see, this been going on. With the getting them old young Spanish-speaking maids and stuff. That's what happened. This is sick. Now they coming for 50 fucking million goddamn dollars. Now we're gonna get to, we got some more. We're gonna get to if there's more evidence of Smokey beat. I want to know. But Smokey laying down a blanket, a towel, and having sex with him. Oh man, why y'all sex? Why y'all Smokey? What happened, Smokey?
Laugh if you want, and it's not funny. In a lot of countries, and even in America, being a domestic worker, a lot of them are raped. A lot of them are assaulted, you know, and this even goes back to when anyway, let me not get into whatever. Anyway, they're saying
a child from his maid.
It was filed just today, May 6th. The claims all took place in their private residence in Chatsworth, California. Chatsworth, California, I think is where a lot of vineyards are. So this is like a mansion. Hold on, let me Google Smokey's house in Chatsworth. Okay, I just checked. So it's not like a mega mansion. It's not like Meghan Markle's, but it's about.
If this lawsuit go through, oh man, watch Gloria already. She finna go find all of those Spanish-speaking house ladies. A lot of them absolutely have done sexual things with these rich. White men, Black men, rich men, powerful men, period. If they get Smokey for this, they finna clean their ass up. It's gonna be all over with. I bet their ass want to clean their own house now.
10,000 square feet. They bought it for 2.71. Yes, I was all in the business. They bought it for 2.71 million. It is now worth 4.1 million. It's in Chatsworth. It's pretty modest I don't know why Smokey Robinson, I thought he would be on some billionaire Jeff Bezos stuff. But again, how big a house do you need? It's 10,000 square feet. It's about 4 bedrooms. It's in Chatsworth, California. Yeah. And Smokey Robinson has multiple houses. But it's 4.1 million. Hold on, let me go look at this one more time. Damn, okay, I'm back with more news. So Smokey apparently has multiple properties. Okay, I'm Googling this for y'all. He apparently has multiple properties. That other one that I said was like 10,000 square feet, that was in Cedar, California. The Chatsworth one, I actually found, it actually is a mansion. But get this, he listed that house for sale for 7.99 million. So basically 8 million, complete with a theater complex, a wine cellar, and a man cave. It's a 6-bedroom property. Chatsworth estate. It's a huge estate.
Hey, Sex outside of marriage is rape now, bro. Yes, yeah, good. This is biblical. Y'all ass is going down. Sex outside of marriage is gonna be rape. That's what they finna find out. Ain't no consensual nothing. They coming back, circle back on your motherfucking ass. Anything outside of marriage and your ass got some money, it's over for you.
First hit the market in 2005 for a cool 10.5 million and was lowered to 10 million in 2007 with no success. During his time at the property, he's recorded many albums and whatever. Again, he put this up for sale in 2014, then he took it down. So he's always trying to get rid of it, but nobody's really buying it. That just could be because he's asking for too much. In any case, yeah. First of all, why does Smokey Robinson look like Beyonce's nephew, Jules? Second of all, Solange, let me find out you like older men. Second of all, yeah, his Frances is his second wife. She was in charge of the interior design, and it took a year to get to build it from scratch. Y'all, what do y'all think? What do y'all think? Again, it's a big mansion. You wouldn't need maids. I'm just wondering, did all the maids work there together? And also, did they have to stay quiet because something was going to happen to them? Again, it's not known whether it's unknown whether any of the maids went to the police. They said that they were repeatedly abused while working for Smokey and his wife. And they said that this often happened on the weekends while Frances was away. And they said she would specifically call her to areas of the house with no surveillance to carry out the abuse. This is sad. This is actually really, really sad. Listen, thoughts and prayers to, and I mean that seriously, to the victims. I'm going to research more information because
Smokey got caught up with them young things walking around there cleaning his house up. He horny. They took it down. I don't know if they took advantage of it. We got to look at some more of the evidence before we make our verdict on this here. Because for what I heard so far, Smokey ain't raping nobody. That's crazy that they even saying that. They not really finna ruin that man goddamn name. Well, but hold on, let's look a little deeper. Law and crime. Let's see if because they might got some shit that make us change our mind. You know, maybe it's a little more than what that lady was saying. Let's see. This might change our tone. Let's see if Smokey is a real predator. Now, if he's a predator who's preying on illegals from overseas and shit like that, then that's disgusting.
We filed a complaint against William Smokey Robinson Jr. We believe that Mr. Robinson is a serial and sick rapist. Must stop.
The very man who swooned dance with his music for decades.
Now already that guy sound like he finna change my tone. That man said a sick and a serial raper. So he must be able to fill in the blanks to something we didn't know on some sadistic moves Smokey was making. Let's see.
Is now accused of sexual assault, but he's not the only one named as a defendant in this shocking lawsuit. I'm Elizabeth Milner with Law and Crime. Smokey Robinson and his wife Frances are accused of negligence, sexual battery, false imprisonment, and hostile work environment. And those are just some of the claims brought against the legendary singer by 4 women who we only know as Jane Does.
The principal causes of action against Mr. Robinson in particular are sexual battery, assault, false imprisonment.
My poor dear mother, Lord bless her soul. I'm glad Mama, I'm glad you're not here to see the day Smokey Robinson charged with this type of stuff, man. Oh man, damn man, I wanted my daddy to hear about this, man. I hope my daddy don't gotta. Woo, my pop's too old to hear Smokey is this type of pervert, man. Smokey, my pop's cut it for you when you was over there with the temps, helping to make some of that magic. What happened to you, Smokey?
Gender violence, and creating a hostile work environment. Obviously, these ladies are identified in the lawsuit as Does, Jane Does 1 through 4, to protect their privacy, since the lawsuit involves sexual misconduct of the worst sort.
The nearly 30-page complaint was brought against Smokey Robinson and his wife Frances Robinson today in Los Angeles Superior Court.
Our 4 clients have a common thread. They're Hispanic women who were employed as housekeepers by the Robinsons, earning below minimum wage.
What? Hell no, Smokey. Smokey, you need 5 years for that. Smokey, I know you ain't get them illegals over there. You paying them under minimum wage, and then you touching on them, Smokey. You goddamn creep. Now that's pervert. That's some creepy shit, Smokey. You're not even paying them top dollar. Oh my goodness. I guess that's how the rich stay. What do I know? I'm not rich. Shit, I guess that's how the rich stay rich.
As low-wage workers in vulnerable positions, they lack the resources and options necessary to protect themselves from sexual assaults throughout their tenure as employees for the Robinsons. Let me briefly summarize each of their individual claims. I will not describe the details of the sexual assaults and rapes because they're too graphic and disturbing for this news conference. But you can read them in the complaints that we have provided with many of you today.
According to the court filing, Jane Doe 1 began working for the Robinsons as their housekeeper from January 3rd of 2023 up until February of 2024. She claimed she was forced to resign because Smokey repeatedly sexually assaulted and sexually harassed her. The first alleged incident happened in March of 2023. Jane Doe says she worked on the weekend for the couple. On a Saturday, the complaint says defendant Smokey Robinson would take defendant Frances Robinson to the nail salon and would rush home, knowing that he would be alone with plaintiff JD 1 or Jane Doe 1. When Smokey came home, he allegedly would call her into his bedroom, lock the door, escort the couple's dog Shiloh out of the room. He showers, then only puts on his underwear, then would neatly place a white towel on his bed in preparation for what was about to occur. The filing goes on to say Smokey would kiss Jane Doe in her mouth, her neck, and breast. Then he would allegedly roughly penetrate her vagina with his fingers, orally copulate her, then penetrate her with his penis, which...
Wait a minute. Now, I ain't the smartest guy in the world. I'm not, I did not go to college and things of that nature. But I didn't hear how her clothes got off. I didn't hear how did Smokey went to the shower and what did he barricade the door? I'm missing something here. She played those Smokey, and he. Senior elders, this is why you gotta protect our elders too, because this been going on in neighborhoods for a long time. It's just been them young girls been going by there on the first when them old men get their checks, going by there rubbing on them, taking hundreds of dollars from them. Y'all know about that shit. Smokey just got hit with these housekeepers, got his ass. But it says, Smokey being I'm not taking up for Smokey, but that's crazy, that motherfucker. What they just reported to us. What, lady? What the hell were you doing?
Caused her great pain. The complaint alleges Smokey enjoyed ejaculating in her without using a condom. Jane Doe says she would resist, and in one attempt to stop him, she said, "You're married," and Smokey casually ignored it. The filing says Smokey allegedly sexually assaulted Jane Doe in that same manner at least 7 times, and the last assault occurred on February 17th of 2024, and she resigned the following week. As for Frances Robinson, Jane Doe 1 alleges she failed to take appropriate action to prevent her husband's conduct, despite having full knowledge of his alleged prior acts of sexual misconduct. According to the filing, he settled cases with other women that have suffered an...
See, this old school black lady is true old school black women. See, they used to... I tell people that, you want to know why our elders, see, they had all that divorce shit was out the fucking window back in the day. We ain't getting on divorce. They kill that nigga before they divorce him. That ain't gonna happen. Because that is knocking out all kind of resources in the black community, them damn divorces. But this type of shit was going on. This type of shit was going on.
And experienced similar sexual assaults perpetrated by him. Jane Doe 1 also claims Frances perpetuated a hostile work environment by regularly screaming at Jane Doe 1. As for Jane Doe 2, she worked for the couple from May of 2014 until February of 2020 and only resigned for the same reasons as Jane Doe 1. Jane Doe 2 claims that Smokey sexually assaulted her in the later part of 2016 when they were home alone together. Smokey allegedly texted her asking her to meet him at his home in Chatsworth, which according to the complaint was without closed-circuit cameras. He allegedly summoned Jane Doe 2 to the laundry room or garage where the cameras weren't there. He would grab her and begin penetrating her with his fingers, and then he would allegedly rape her. The
filings so crazy. They saying they putting the raping now, but Smokey thinking this is some type of he playboy. He got some little, he old pervert, bro. You know what I'm saying? But for them, they finna tear Smokey's whole legacy apart. And I haven't seen any rape yet. I'm just gonna tell the truth. Y'all know I'm going hard. I haven't seen that yet, man. I haven't seen that yet. They just saying that because some sexual contact took place. But that's crazy, motherfucker. They finna drag Smokey and they finna hit this motherfucker pockets. If they want $50 million, what Smokey was wrong was not paying these. He supposed to be paying them. That's why, clean your own house. And where all the youngsters in his family? What? This is crazy. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened, man. Smokey was targeted by these motherfuckers. They got it. They hooked his ass up. Now, and his wife, shame on her. She should have kept them young things away. She should have knew. Every wife, they know their husband. She should have never left this nigga around alone around no goddamn women. That's serious motherfucking business. She should have knew better. Now I'm gonna let Smokey be Smokey. You see what happened? Let Smokey be Smokey now.
Filing says Smokey allegedly sexually assaulted Jane Doe 2 23 different times and would humiliate her. He also allegedly didn't use a condom with her either. And if she refused, Smokey allegedly would make his wife be mean to her. Jane Doe 2, like Jane Doe 1, says she was unwilling to report due to fear of losing her livelihood, public embarrassment, effects on her immigration status, and because Smokey was a well-known celeb with influential friends and associates. Jane Doe 3 allegations are very similar. She worked from Smokey from February of 2012 until April of 2024. He would allegedly do the same bedroom ritual, including showering, placing a towel on his bed, then would allegedly force Jane Doe 3 to lie face down on the towel and then would penetrate her. The complaint alleges Smokey Robinson raped Jane Doe 3 in the same manner at least 20 times. On one occasion, Jane Doe 3 allegedly resisted the singer, and Smokey allegedly offered her $500 to allow him to orally copulate her, which she refused. She claims she resigned from her job in April of 2024 after his alleged sexual assault and hostile work environment was experienced daily. And she says that Francis allegedly perpetrated the hostile work environment by regularly screaming at her and saying ethnic slurs to her, something that Jane Doe 1 and 2 also claim happened to them. As for Jane Doe 4, she was also a longtime housekeeper for the singer, working from him from October of 2006 to April of 2024. She also worked as a personal assistant, cook, and hairdresser for Smokey's wife, Frances. Jane Doe 4 claims the first sexual assault happened in 2007 when she accompanied Smokey to his Las Vegas home. When the two were alone together, he allegedly forced her into the bedroom and raped her. Another incident in the filing says around mid-2019, Jane Doe 4 was cleaning the primary bedroom. Smokey showered and returned to the bedroom while naked and erect. He allegedly did the same method that he allegedly did with Jane Doe's 1, 2, and 3, pulling back the sheets, laying the towel down, and began kissing her breasts and neck, then allegedly raped her too. According to the filing, Smokey's alleged sexual harassment and assault continued until the very day she decided to resign. The filing says Smokey's wife, Frances, also regularly screamed at Jane Doe 4 in a hostile manner and used ethnic slurs against her.
The obvious question that one will ask, and I suspect most will, why didn't they report Robinson's criminal misconduct to law enforcement or go public before now? As I said before, these women were all low wage earners living from paycheck to paycheck. They all feared missing a payday and not being able to pay their rent or buy food for their families. And also, Smokey's Robinson celebrity status intimidated them and all made them feel powerless. I want to add that these four women were afraid of shame, familial humiliation, and embarrassment. The stigma that still exists in some cultures that unfortunately blames a rape victim for the assault perpetrated against them. And having to tell their husband and children of these despicable acts against them left them overwhelmed with shame and embarrassment. So throughout their dreadful experiences with Mr. Robinson, All four women remained silent because many of them worked at the same time. Too embarrassed to reveal their assaults by Mr. Robinson to each other. Once they broke their silence, an avalanche of emotions began to flow between them. Hence, they're all here today.
In addition to the allegations of rape, sexual harassment, and hostile work environment, all four Jane Does claimed the Robinsons failed to pay them minimum or overtime wages. They weren't provided rest or lunch breaks or provided wage statements for the hours that were worked. The four Jane Does are also suing for intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, gender violence, failure to pay overtime wages, and more. The four Jane Does are also seeking damages of no less than $50 million.
Obviously, no amount of money can compensate these women for what Mr. Robinson subjected them to. But given the gravity of Mr. Robinson's despicable and reprehensible misconduct that is further detailed in the complaint, this amount is clearly warranted.
There are so many disturbing and, quite frankly, unsettling allegations mapped out in this complaint. I'm joined now by former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Nima, I was pretty stunned by this complaint, especially because of these graphic details in it. What's your reaction to it?
Stunned is the right word, Elizabeth. I couldn't believe it when I read the allegations in the complaint. Not just one victim, multiple victims telling very similar stories of sexual assault and vaginal rape. Really disturbing to read. And obviously, as lawyers, you think you've seen it all, but this was quite disturbing.
They didn't say it was quite disturbing with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I didn't hear none of this shit where Arnold Schwarzenegger sat there and was doing that to his mate. Then Kate had a child, that lady, the child, and he didn't even want to admit it till people say, boy, that boy looked just like you. That's your goddamn twin. Then his wife separated from him because the story had got too big. So everything, I want you to think about everything they said about Smokey, they never once said that about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that shit is going rampant throughout Hollywood. But Smokey, old man, got caught slipping. They finna hit his ass and run his pockets. But every time they saying this, remember Arnold Schwarzenegger had a child by his goddamn mate.
Reading through the sordid details in this complaint.
Absolutely. And, you know, Smokey Robinson is a legendary singer, obviously for R&B, obviously for type of love music. But this is just, I can't emphasize enough how disturbing it is. And what do you kind of make of this pattern between Jane Doe 1, 2, 3, and 4? Smokey Robinson would allegedly shower, put a towel down, and allegedly raped 4 different women, all of whom worked on his staff, all of whom were 4 Hispanic women, all now going by Jane Doe. But what's your reaction to just this, what feels like and appears like abuse of power, but also sexual assault and rape?
Graphic details and very similar stories. Like you said, he would allegedly shower, he would come out, he put the towel down. Oftentimes these sexual assaults allegedly took place in parts of the home that didn't have cameras, when his wife was getting her nails done or otherwise out of the house. And you have individuals who, like you said, fall into the same category of, you know, household help of a certain national origin and certain race, and you would take advantage of them, both in terms of being their employer, sexually assaulting them, groping them, even penetrating them. So really disturbing allegations. You know, when you're handling these types of cases as a civil plaintiff's lawyer, which I am, and oftentimes people that are abusers, they are usually not abusing just one person. So when you have, you know, individuals come forward that substantiate these allegations, it can make for a much more powerful case.
And it seems like there's power in numbers when it comes to this type of thing, especially when it comes to credibility and believability at that matter as well, too. And you brought up something interesting just about this pattern and that, you know, this sometimes doesn't start with just one victim. Sometimes there's victims before that. And obviously these allegations, you know, these are just alleged at this point. But I found something kind of interesting in reading through the complaint is that, you know, the Jane Doe say that Smokey has done this before and he's settled with a number of other women, even even prior to these 4 Jane Does. What do you make of just that little statement in the court filing?
This type of shame.
So like you
Kill a
said,
whole man.
usually abusers have a type and they have an MO. And it doesn't matter whether you're Jeffrey Epstein, R. Kelly, and you tend to like underage victims, or you're a Harvey Weinstein or a Diddy, and you're sexually assaulting adults. Allegedly, of course. The fact that these allegations have been brought by not just these 4 women, but there's other previous claimants as well. Well, obviously the question is any of that evidence going to come in a civil lawsuit? Can they be subpoenaed to testify? Now, usually now under California law and federal law, you can't gag or have an NDA when you're talking about sexual assault. Those confidentiality agreements, they go out the window. So potentially, if there are some previous settlements, even if those settlements were confidential at the time, those victims may be able to testify in this case.
And it wasn't just one defendant named in the complaint. It was another defendant, too, that's pretty important to this story and to this case. And that's Smokey Robinson's own wife, who was named as one of the defendants. And for the most part, her allegations kind of stem from a hostile work environment. You made a point earlier that, we know that these alleged victims in this case, that they are Hispanic women, and that Frances allegedly would shout out ethnic slurs to her and just would scream at them as well, too. What do you just make of her alleged involvement in all of this?
Obviously, the most serious claims are the sexual assault and the rape claims, but there's other claims as well, employment claims, which can be serious. Obviously, in this case, they're less serious because of the graphic nature of the rape claims. But, you have claims of a hostile work environment, sexual harassment, right? They're employees in the home and they can't be groped, or they can't be discriminated against, or to deal with racial slurs. I mean, that's something that's unlawful in any state, and especially in the state of California. California tends to be very employee friendly in these types of claims, and both in terms of the protections and in terms of the jury verdicts here in California. They tend to protect employees here. We do employment work and we handle these types of cases all the time, and the jury verdicts can be pretty significant.
Yeah, and in your opinion, we see this always brought up, especially when it comes to us talking about, the Diddy lawsuits, and now we have this going on with Smokey Robinson. But a lot of people are always questioning, why not bring this up criminally? Why go the civil matter, or the civil route, excuse me? Some of these alleged incidents happened just last year, but in your opinion, what do you say to that?
As a former prosecutor, there are many times where I walk my client into the Los Angeles Police Department or the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department or the local police department. I've met with district attorneys, sex prosecutors, and the burden of proof in a criminal case is higher. Prosecutors sometimes like to take the easy wins. He said, she said type cases can be challenging to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, again, if you have multiple victims, that makes it easy. And frankly, Elizabeth, up until November, we had a district attorney in Los Angeles, George Gascon, who was perceived as being soft on crime and not prosecuting a lot of these cases. Now we have a new district attorney, Nathan Hochman, who's been more aggressive. We've seen it with cases like the Menendez brothers, for instance. He's taken a very different position. So sometimes the criminal case is outside of your hands as a victim's attorney. Believe me, there's many times where I want the case to be prosecuted, and prosecutors just don't pick it up because they don't want to take challenging cases. And if you look at the statistics, when it comes to rape cases that are actually pursued, the criminal judgment, or even some sort of plea agreement, it's less than 10% because victims often don't come forward, or when they do, they're disbelieved. Law enforcement doesn't want to investigate. Maybe the claims are dated. Maybe a civil lawsuit's been filed and they think this is all about money when it isn't. The victim just wants to get some sort of justice, even if it's civil justice, because they can control the civil case where they can't the criminal.
And how kind of tough is it, especially for, alleged victims in this case being Jane Doe 1, 2, 3, and 4, to go up against a powerful figure and a powerful celebrity? Obviously, we've seen this in Diddy's case, but, in Smokey Robinson's case, it kind of weighs the same a little bit here, where we have a legendary singer. He's beloved by so many people. He's been singing for decades. I feel like a lot of people are always inclined to take the celebrity's point of view as opposed to what he allegedly subjected his victims to in that were kind of mapped out in this complaint, and I'm kind of like catching the press conference going on right now where, the Jane Does, they're appearing in what looks like a wig and sunglasses and a mask because they're so frightful of having their names brought up, having their real names brought up, or even just showing any glimpse of what their identity is. But then you have, also the power in numbers that it's 4 different women as opposed to, Diddy's suits where, they were filed one by one and not jointly. But what's your reaction to just going against a powerful, powerful figure like Smokey Robinson?
Elizabeth, it's a tale as old as time. A rich and powerful man takes advantage of that disparity in power and sexually assaults or otherwise abuses a younger woman. And oftentimes those women are not believed. I can guarantee you in the comments below on Law and Crime, there's going to be people saying that this is a shakedown, this is extortion, this is a money grab, maybe even horrific racial slurs or degrading slurs about these women. I don't know them. I'm not representing them. I don't know Smokey Robinson or his wife. The allegations may not be true, but people are quick to defend celebrities. Celebrities do very well in this country when it comes to civil and criminal cases because jurors and members of the public love them. They can't think that their favorite celebrity, their favorite artist can be involved.
I'm trying to see how an old man could take his clothes off, go in the bathroom, shower, come out naked, lay towels down, and then these women, and like I say, they never said, how did they who took your clothes off? How did you get naked? And this old man, he slammed you onto the bed. Then this elderly man, it's like this is crazy. That they running this, Smokey. Oh man, they say this. The last incident happened last year. 84 years old. They need to explain themselves. Now, how exactly? If I was their husband, I'm like, what, you coming to me with this shit? What type? This was you ran the scam. I know their husbands know better. I know their husbands know that you was fucking old Smokey, nigga, and you decided to come up. I know their husbands can't be this senile and crazy to think that their wives, the 84-year-old man, slammed them on that damn towel and had sex with them. Come on now. But their husbands want this money too.
Well, someone that represents victims, and I've sued, so many people in the music industry. I can tell you that it happens, and it happens quite frequently. Whether it's Kanye, Lizzo, Jason Derulo, Megan Thee Stallion. I mean, I can't tell you how many cases we have active right now against people in the music industry. And obviously everyone knows about Diddy and R. Kelly and others that face criminal prosecution as well. But this is a big problem. Victims are not believed. And that's why so many of them are hesitant to come forward. I can't tell you how many people come into my office here in Los Angeles. I sit down with them. They tell me this horrific tale. And when I tell them, okay, this is what a lawsuit entails, you're going to have to tell your story at a deposition. You're going to have to testify at trial. Even if you're a Jane Doe and even if people aren't reporting your name, courts in this country, they're open to the public, right? We recently had a case against Soldier Boy, where our victim had to come and tell her story and relive that trauma of being raped and sexually assaulted. It is not easy. So for every one of those victims we have, there's probably 5 to 10 others that can't go through it. They can't relive that trauma in a very public way. So it is challenging for the victims here.
Yeah. And what do you make of this $50 million in damages that the plaintiffs are seeking? And do you think that this is possible, that this will spring a domino effect, maybe something similar to how we kind of saw with Diddy as well, too?
We did. I mean, you're talking about Diddy. It was Cassie Ventura, right? She had a very long relationship with Combs and more than a decade. And when she filed that lawsuit, we saw others come forward. And, 4 is a lot of victims. I think probably that's what we may have in the Diddy criminal case, but that's pretty significant in terms of the number of people who are making very similar allegations of being raped. And 50 million collectively is not a significant number, in my opinion, for someone that has been raped in some instances dozens of times. And collectively, if that's the demand, I think that is not unreasonable under the circumstances.
He had a kid by her.
Well, Nima Rahmani, I want to thank you so much for your time today and your insight into this. This was a very, very shocking complaint that, just reading through it, I was just astonished. But before we sign you off, do you see this case going to trial?
It's possible. The vast majority of cases settle. I do expect this case to settle. Sounds like Smokey Robinson has settled these claims before. I don't know if he has $50 million, in his bank account or liquid or even handy, but if there is the possibility of settlement, oftentimes that makes sense. Less than 2% of these cases actually go all the way to trial.
You crazy. Y'all just slaying Smokey, man. That's why I always get them people no motherfucking money. I get them whatever I owe them for the wages. Man, he wrong for that. Man, paying people less than minimum. That's some crazy. That's an old tight walled ass black man shit right there. Nigga, you paying them people less than minimum wages, nigga. And then you sitting around here, you old man, you humping on these people. This Smokey a tight motherfucker. God damn, Smokey. 84 years old. That's Smokey. That nigga old.
Diddy Combs trial.
The judge was like, hold on, y'all should Smokey had a second trial, man. I don't know if I can believe this. Smokey 84 years old. Man, y'all, I was smoking. I was like, they gotta prove that, y'all. I was shit.
Hey, what's up, guys? How y'all doing today? Well, baby, if you were here for the Sean Diddy Combs trial, we have you covered. I know you guys are wondering who are the jurors, who has been kicked out, and guess what, you guys? We looked into it, and we have the name of every celebrity that has been mentioned in the Sean Diddy Combs trial thus far. And baby, it might surprise you. For one, Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child was mentioned. And no, she ain't a friend of Cassie. I'm just saying. On top of that, we have the DL on, no pun intended, Diddy. We have the down low on the jurors that look like they are going to say, if you guys don't know, it's voir dire. Everybody, the prosecution and defense get a certain amount of to get jurors out of there. It's almost like a first round draft pick. It looks like they already know who are going to be the first people that are going to be a part of the Diddy jury. Are y'all ready? I know you're all. Let's get into that. What y'all want to hear about, the jury first, or do you want to hear about every celebrity mentioned in the trial? Okay, let's get into this. Every celebrity mentioned. Okay, first off, Michael B. Jordan. Now get this. The reason he was mentioned is not because he was at a freak off. At least I hope not, baby, because he ain't scared. He dated Cassie and Lauren London. He said, I will take every girl you have, Diddy, and I wish you would put a bomb in my car. Anyway, right? Michael B. Jordan previously dated Cassie. When Cassie sued Diddy in November 2023, her relationship with Michael B. Jordan was referenced in the lawsuit. Of course, you guys know Diddy and Cassie settled the lawsuit. Again, some people are whispering, is Michael B. Jordan going to testify? Or has he given a sworn affidavit? That's when he says it under penalty of perjury. In federal trials, penalty of perjury is why people tell the truth. They can put you in jail for up to 5 years. So you have penalty of perjury, you have deposition, and of course you have testimony in the witness box. I don't think that any of the witnesses have been deposed thus far. Michael B. Jordan may have given a sworn affidavit. However, regardless, he is not on Diddy's side. Okay? So he ain't testifying to Diddy's good nature. Harvey Pierre. We already knew Harvey Pierre was going to be bought in. He's a record exec who has worked with Diddy's Bad Boy Entertainment. He's also mentioned in several lawsuits, so that's no surprise. Mike Myers, that's weird, okay? But there's a reference to Diddy in one of his Austin Powers movies. Mike Myers is actually pretty close with Diddy. Now, we know he's not on Cassie's side. However, they're saying he might be called in to testify because he witnessed something, okay? Now, Dallas Austin, the producer Dallas Austin. He's a record producer. He's previously dated Kim Porter, who passed away in 2018. So here's the thing with Dallas Austin. I also wonder, hear me out. Cassie, when she left Diddy, wanted a record career. I believe she fought tooth and nail to get out of the contract. Diddy is still maybe bitter about that. That doesn't matter. What do I think the role is with Cassie and Dallas Austin? I don't think they dated. I can't see Cassie trying to get some beats from Dallas Austin. Or maybe they dated. I don't know. The point is Dallas Austin's name was mentioned. I think it's more ties to Kim Porter. Don't forget that the Diddy's people have been arguing that it's not fair that they're actually bringing up instances of alleged abuse from a Diddy victim who is no longer here to testify. I think that actually might be Kim Porter. On top of that, let's not forget that Diddy's team, even though they tried to gaslight us and lie, it's pretty much been confirmed that the diary existed. Although it wasn't a diary, it might have been her notes, it might have been her emails, whatever it was. There is a record of the way Kim felt about Diddy. People are saying it will be brought up in court. Dawn Richards, that's no surprise. Of course, you know Dawn from Making of the Band, and also Danity Kane. The boys stop, then show, stop it, show. Okay, let me stop playing, right? But y'all know Dawn Richards, and she's also suing Diddy for everything he owns. Michelle Williams. Listen, they were asked about Michelle Williams on the first day of the jury selection. And when I first heard this and people told me, I said, well, she's not the only Michelle Williams. Maybe y'all are talking about Dawson Creek's Michelle Williams, but they said, no, say my name, Michelle Williams. More on that later. My ear is to the ground. Again, Michelle, what was you doing in the Diddy stuff? And where was Kelly and Beyonce? That's all I want to know. Kanye West. Okay, listen, we already knew. Kanye West has exposed himself as the biggest weirdo, and Bianca too. They are just dirty. They are dirty, but not in like a cool way. Ew, not indie sleaze, just right? We already know Kanye West has admitted to Mololoing his cousin until Kanye turned 14. His cousin was a few months younger than him, or maybe a few years younger than him. He said him and Bianca are swingers. Let's not forget he thanked Diddy on an award show and said, thank you so much for teaching me everything I know about finding a wife. So I'm pretty sure that Kanye had Bianca riding all the rides and sliding all the slides. They probably pushed, but Kanye and Diddy probably pushed Bianca out the way and said, move. We got some business to take care of. This is men's business. And then embraced. Okay, who's next? Kid Cudi. You know Kanye mad because you know he's still mad at Kid Cudi that he sided with Pete Davidson over him. But now that we've gotten to know Kanye West a little bit more than we'd ever want to, you know what? I want to apologize to Kid Cudi because at one point I thought you were the problem. No, Kanye was, is, and will always be the problem. Anyway, if you guys don't know, Kid Cudi actually confirmed that Kanye not only put a kabooey, a bomb in his car, but then went and let him know. The fire department came, the car caught on fire. It was never reported. The police never did anything, which leads you to ask how much pull did Diddy have with the LAPD and with the LA Fire Department? I'm just saying. Anyway, Cassie, we already know why that is. Lori Ann Gibson, Boom Cat. The choreographer worked with Diddy on Making the Band as well as short-lived TV show P. Diddy Star Maker. I remember when him and Boom Cat fell out because it looked like he was trying to assault her with a few other things. Now you know, right? With a few other things. Yeah, that's going to come out. However, remember at the award speech when Diddy was like, yo, and I want to thank Lori Ann Gibson for keeping me free. Boy, what did you mean by keeping you free? And Lori Ann, don't lie to the feds. Don't lie to the feds. I am really concerned about whether is she on Diddy's side or not. They did reconcile in the past few years. I think she was even teaching the twins like a little choreo or something, but we'll see. Lauren London. Okay. Now they said, don't forget that Diddy actually paid for Lauren London's security and a whole bunch of stuff when Nipsey Hussle died. Lauren London, Cassie, Nipsey, and Diddy, they were super tight. Lauren said out of her mouth that Diddy was a great source of support for her after the 2019 death of her longtime partner, Nipsey Hussle. Now, the funny thing is, I was thinking, okay, so it's Lauren coming out and testifying for Diddy. But the people around me actually came out that said, Lauren is a true blue friend to Cassie. She was there after Cassie left Diddy. She was there when Diddy tried to blackball Cassie. You know, she was there through all of it. And they said she is a California friend, super, super down for Cassie. They cannot imagine in any stretch of the world that Lauren would throw away that friendship for Diddy. It don't matter how much money Diddy gave her. It don't matter what Diddy did. She is not throwing she's not throwing that friendship away. So if Diddy is going to get Lauren to be on stand and say he's a good person, I would say kibosh to that because they said Lauren is 100% not going to do that for Diddy. Anyway, you guys, listen, Let me know what you think in the comments. In the next video, I'm going to let you know the
who might be mentioned at this trial, a theft of a wand at the Harry Potter store, Combs apparently admitting he's nervous, and whether or not we can actually get an impartial jury to hear this monumental case. This is a full recap of the day and what you might have missed in court. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law and Crime legal alert. So lawsuits allege that antacid use has been linked to increases in stomach cancer and gastric cancer. Yeah, so if you or a loved one have been diagnosed with stomach cancer or gastric cancer after using an antacid, you may qualify for compensation. One of our legal sponsors is partnering with the Driscoll Law Firm. This is a national firm helping those injured to ensure their claims are thoroughly presented. Visit antacidclaims.com/sidebar. Scan the QR code on screen to answer less than 10 questions and check your eligibility to file a claim. It's official. We're here. The start of United States versus Sean P. Diddy Combs. What began with his arrest in September of 2024, an indictment on federal sex crimes charges, now brings us to May 5th, 2025, the start of his trial, the start of jury selection, to be more precise. Can't believe we're here. I've said it before. I've said it again. The idea of this going to trial in under a year from his arrest and indictment at the federal level, very, very rare. But he has been speeding his way towards trial, wants his day in court, and now we are here. So this case has changed a lot, too, since September, by the way. Over the last several months, his indictment has been amended. We're now at his third superseding indictment, where he's facing 5 counts. Count 1, racketeering conspiracy. So that's that Combs and others allegedly created a criminal enterprise using the resources and personnel of his multifaceted business empire, where he allegedly abused, threatened, and coerced women to fulfill his sexual desires, including engaging in prolonged or extensive or elaborate sexual performances, sometimes known as freak-offs, that included sex workers. They're the underlying predicate acts that need to be proved, at least 2 need to be proved in order to get the racketeering charge, these underlying crimes that make up the larger pattern of criminal racketeering activity. So whether that be kidnapping, forced labor, arson, sex trafficking. And speaking of which, counts 2 and 4 are sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion of victims 1 and 2, namely that Combs intentionally harbored, transported, enticed these alleged victims to cause them to engage in commercial sex acts using force, fraud, or coercion. Commercial sex acts meaning something of value was exchanged or promised. Counts 3 and 5, transportation to engage in prostitution, namely that Combs allegedly transported victims and commercial sex workers for purposes of sex work, for purposes of prostitution. And now we need a panel of 12 jurors with potentially 6 alternates to sit and hear this case in Manhattan federal court. And it's being reported that 150 potential jurors are being brought in. So what did day 1 of jury selection look like in Sean Combs' criminal case? Well, since there are no cameras allowed in federal court, we have with us our very own eyes and ears about what happened in that courtroom today. Law and Crimes reporter Elizabeth Milner was there. Elizabeth, so good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jesse.
So I'm going to start with the question I always ask you. How did Diddy look? What was he wearing? And who was with him?
Well, today was a lot different, obviously, because it's day 1 of jury selection, or to some, they consider it day 1 of the trial. So Diddy looked completely different from his pretrial hearing in that he wasn't wearing the standard issue khaki tan jumpsuit provided by MDC. Instead, he looked a lot different. And as we know from the last judge's order that was made last week, Diddy is allowed to wear normal attire, but he looked a little similar to what I kind of presumed to be a choir boy. So he came in with a blue pullover sweater. He had a white collared shirt. He had navy slacks. Couldn't get a look at his shoes, but of course we know from the judge's order that he is not allowed to have laces on those shoes. So it's unclear if he had just shoes with no laces, wearing loafers. Couldn't see from where I was inside the gallery because I was even lucky to get inside that courtroom today because let me tell you, Jesse, it is inundated with so much press from honestly around the world. This is not just a nationwide case. There are international outlets out here as well too, trying to get inside that courtroom, trying to get a peek at Diddy. And I thankfully was one of the lucky few to get inside because I think they were only allowing about 10 or 15 people from the press because the rest had to be filled with a lot of prospective jurors. So the side where normally the defense's side sits or normally the family sits, instead that entire side was empty, at least for the first half of court today, mainly because we had to put in all those jurors. And I know we're going to talk about that more in a second. But as far as Diddy goes today, his demeanor seemed upbeat at first, but then there was a moment, I think it was a little bit before the lunch break, where Diddy kept having to go, take some restroom breaks in between the prospective jurors' questions and that type of sort. And then he uttered something that I found to be pretty astounding given how confident and upbeat he appeared. He said, "Your Honor, I'm a little nervous," which is something that finally you kind of see the mask slip off a little bit, where it's like Diddy is finally admitting the weight is kind of coming on to him as far as having to go to trial for these federal charges that he's facing. And of course, that being 5 federal charges that he's facing, which could carry, if he is sentenced or if he is convicted on these charges, could carry decades in prison. So it's a lot of weight on his shoulders. And we've kind of presumed that as well, too, because obviously since he's been incarcerated, his hair has been great. He did come in today. His face wasn't completely shaven, so his goatee was a little white as well, too. But when he had first come into the courtroom, he did what he usually does. He hugged all of his attorneys. He looked outside or he looked into the gallery to see who was there as far as family goes. Unfortunately, no immediate family was inside the courtroom today. But again, we have 2 more months to go of trial, so it's likely that they'll be here for opening statements. But that's, unclear as far as what family members will be there at what times, that type of sort. But as far as today inside the courtroom, it was really that associate or member of his entourage who, again, was wearing that free puff hat, that free puff sweatshirt. But instead, he had to flip it inside out, as we probably presumed, because those prospective jurors are going to be coming into that same courtroom where we're sitting as the press, where his associates are sitting. So he had to turn that shirt inside out. And what I did also spot was Justin Combs's brother inside the courtroom too. Now with Justin Combs's brother, we have to remember that he is not Diddy's son. However, it's somebody who has been very who Diddy is obviously very familiar with, that being his son's other brother from a different relationship, because it's a tangled family web as far as everything goes with the family and everything like that. But while Justin Combs wasn't inside the courtroom, his brother was. And I think Diddy kind of looked at both of those two associates and then Justin Combs' brother kind of as support, kind of as like a nice presence to be inside the courtroom, because I do think he relies a lot on the support of his family and of his loved ones to be inside that courtroom. But again, we still have 2 more months of trial. So I assume, his mother, his daughter, maybe possibly his daughters, but at least bare minimum, his sons will be inside that courtroom. If they'll be there every day, that's a wait and see. But I'm sure for opening statements, they definitely will be.
And I got to say, I'm not surprised if he meant it. He's nervous. Look, it's not only decades. He could potentially face life in prison if he's convicted of the most serious charge. And look, his defense team was pushing forward to get this in front of a jury as soon as possible. It seems they feel confident in getting an acquittal here or putting the prosecution's feet to the fire. I want to move on to a little bit about what happened today. You and I have spoken earlier today about who was there for him. Attorneys there for him. Mark Garagos now there is in a more of a consultant role. So you have the attorneys, you have the prosecutors in court. I want to talk about the jury. Okay, so it's my understanding that prospective jurors came in last week. They filled out these questionnaires. And based on their responses, that number is going to be ultimately whittled down to the jurors who were selected in this case. So first, before we even get into the ins and outs of what jurors said in court, can you just give us a brief snapshot of what were some of the questions that these jurors were asked in their questionnaires? Because that became a big focus of what their responses were. So, and I know, and by the way, just to let everybody know, a little while ago, the court actually released preliminary instructions in this case and some of those questions too, and maybe we'll put it up. But Elizabeth, you give us a general brief idea about what were some of the questions they were asked.
Well, some of the questions included just people and places, whether or not there was a whole laundry list of celebrities and whether or not these prospective jurors were familiar with them. You know, they ranged from Kanye West to Michael B. Jordan to Young Miami to Dallas Austin, who's a music producer, to Harv Pierre, who actually was named as one of the defendants in one of Diddy's civil suits. And so prospective jurors were asked who they knew, and most of them were very honest about their answering. They were like, you know what, I don't know them personally, but I do recognize, for example, Michael B. Jordan from movies. Obviously, Sinners is very popular right now. So, of course, that is probably going to be the name most were able to answer yes or no to. But I was kind of surprised at how many people didn't know of these laundry lists of popular celebrities, especially when you have names like Kanye West on there, especially when you have names like, Michael B. Jordan, that type of sort. But there were some prospective jurors who did not or who were not familiar with these certain people. Now, as far as places goes, I don't know the full extent of what was asked as far as places goes, but there was this one juror who did kind of talk about a hotel, the Essex House Hotel, that was on the list of places that prospective jurors were asked about. And this juror in particular, he just said, he had worked at this particular hotel sometime last year and all of that sort. Now, as far as some of the other questions that were asked, they were asked simple questions as far as, do you know any additional information about this case? Do you have any training in addictive treatment, domestic violence, sexual abuse? Do you have any views about prosecutors or law enforcement? Have you been involved in legal issues such as a lawsuit, such as a criminal case? Have you been a victim of a crime? Do you have feelings about law enforcement, hip hop artists, witnesses testifying under immunity, witnesses also testifying under a pseudonym? And is there any reason that you wouldn't be able to serve as a prospective juror? Now, some of these questions, especially when it comes to legal issues, criminal issues, surprisingly, a lot of people were very forthcoming, whether it be that they were in a DUI accident, that being that they were the victim of a DUI accident. One woman had talked about how she stole a wand from Harry Potter World.
Yeah.
A lot of these jurors have been very transparent as far as being honest about some of the legal issues that they've dealt with in their past.
I definitely want to get into all that for sure. And by the way, just before I get into a little bit more of the celebrity aspect, so I understand the judge came in, brought the jurors in, read them preliminary instructions. And just so everybody knows what we're dealing with, I'm reading from this document that was released. Don't do any research on this case. Don't discuss your questions and answers or the case with anyone or until further instructed by the court. But listen to the schedule. Potential jurors will be called back for further questioning and jury selection from Monday, May 5th through Friday, May 9th. Your availability during that week will be required. The trial will commence on Monday, May 12th, 2025. That's again, assuming they can get a jury by that time. This trial is expected to last about 8 weeks. And generally, trial will be held 5 days per week, Monday through Friday. During the first week of trial, Monday, May 12th, 2025 through Friday, May 16th, 2025. Trial will be held from 9:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. After the first week, trial will be held from 9:30 a.m. until 3 p.m. Trial will not be held on Friday, May 23rd, Monday, May 26th, Thursday, June 19th, Friday, July 4th. These are all the holidays. But going back to the celebrities for a second, I found it very interesting that the jurors were asked, is there anybody on this list that you know? Michael B. Jordan, Kid Cudi, who you and I both know, became a component in Cassie Ventura's lawsuit. We believe Cassie's going to be a part of this case, probably victim one. The allegation is that she had a romantic relationship with him, that Sean Combs may have blown up his car at one point. I didn't know what the connection of Mike Myers, the actor, I didn't know what the connection Michael B. Jordan might be. Kanye West, as far as I know, Elizabeth, Kanye West had been talking to Sean Combs in jail, maybe called him up. I'm surprised by some of these names. And also, if you have any more context about what their connection could be to the discussion about the case, but is it my understanding that Kim Porter, his ex, Sean Combs' ex, the mother of his children, some of his children, and who died several years ago, she may play a role in this case as well?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up. Now, Michael Myers, not 100% sure as far as what his kind of connection is and why his name was even on that list. But as far as Michael B. Jordan, I thought about it for a second, and it kind of makes sense possibly why Michael B. Jordan. And that's that they kind of share a common ex, him, Sean Combs, and Michael B. Jordan. That's Lori Harvey. Now, Lori Harvey dated Sean Combs Combs for a brief period a few years ago. And then as we know, or maybe as people know from Instagram, Michael B. Jordan and Lori Harvey went on to have like a years-long relationship after the fact. Now, that's as far as I know is probably what the connection would be as to why Michael B. Jordan specifically was on that list. But there were other famous names on that list as well, too. You know, you had Aubrey O'Day, you had Don Richard, you had, you know, I go back to like faces like, or names like Har Pierre, who used to be president of Bad Boy Records. And as far as Kim Porter specifically, now she was brought up when one of these prospective jurors was kind of talking about her role as a chief marketing officer for a local or for a big book publishing company. And I bring that up specifically because apparently there is going to be a memoir that's going to be coming out later this fall. And that memoir is going to be Al B. Shore's memoir. And he is a very important kind of central figure a little bit in Diddy's life. And I say that because he is the biological father of Quincy Brown, who Diddy adopted. Diddy, along with Kim Porter, because Kim Porter is Quincy Brown's biological mother. And that's why I say there's such a tangle web when it comes to the Combs / Albie Shore family / you know, Justin Combs' family as well, too. And so that was kind of the context as far as why Kim Porter and even Albie Shore were brought up, in that a prospective juror did work at a local or at a publishing company. I think it was Simon & Schuster. And she was talking about how she had viewed a press release about this memoir that's, again, going to be coming out called Do You Believe Me? And it's pretty interesting, too, because the ties of that, in a sense, are also kind of related to the documentaries. Now, this one, I believe it's the Peacock documentary as opposed to the HBO documentary, and that Albie Shore has made some allegations that have, you know, come from Diddy's team. They have come back and they have you know, said these allegations aren't true when it comes to allegations that somehow, some way Diddy was involved in Kim Porter's death. Now, as far as whether or not this stuff is going to be admitted into trial, that's unclear right now. But It was interesting, kind of the government's point of the case, because they said that they don't really believe that Kim Porter and Albie Shore will really be mentioned in the trial, whereas the defense, they seem pretty adamant that both of those names will be mentioned in the trial. So again, we still have 2 months. We don't know what all the government has up their sleeves, but it'll be interesting to see kind of how the defense comes and counters that, and how all this information that is brought in, some of these documentaries and these podcasts, because it seems that some of the figures that were in these documentaries, according to the government, will also be testifying as witnesses in this case. So it seems like you're kind of just having a little cross pattern above all boards when it comes to what's going on, and how some of these people in Diddy's lives who have appeared on these documentaries will appear inside that courtroom as well, too.
So let's go back to the idea of the jurors having a legal history, whether it's criminal history, whether it's filing lawsuits. You got to tell me what you learned. And please, just to reiterate one more time for our audience, because it struck me, you had a potential juror who stole a wand.
She was probably one of my favorite prospective jurors, I'm not going to lie, that I saw inside that courtroom. And she was interesting. She was a 30-year-old woman. She had talked about how she could be fair and impartial when it comes to this case. She said as far as the list of people and places, she only knew about 2 celebrities on that list. But she was interesting because she said she had a concert or a conference with unrefundable tickets, but then said she could make it work if she were to be selected as part of this juror. But again, she said she could be fair and impartial. She understands that she can't talk about this case with her sister-in-law, who, by the way, she had said in open court that her sister-in-law is a therapist. She had previous training as a teacher to deal with sexual harassment, something that we saw a lot from these jurors talking about, you know, whether or not their job training actually required them to deal with some levels of sexual harassment, that being a training, that being a course, some type of thing. And then she said she had a friend who is a police officer. But as far as her stealing the wand from Harry Potter World, that was obviously brought up in open court, and she was very honest about it. Honestly, when the judge asked her, what did you steal? And she said a wand, there was an audible chuckle inside that courtroom. But pretty much she wasn't like convicted of a crime or anything like that. She had to pay a fine. She was prohibited actually from going to Harry Potter World and Universal Studios in Florida for about a year. So by this time, it looks like she can actually go back there again. But she made another interesting comment whenever she was being questioned by the judge, and that she had said that and again, I have to kind of commend some of these jurors for being just very honest and inside that courtroom today. But, you know, when asked about social media posts and if she made posts about the case, she didn't say she made a post about the case in particular, but instead she said she liked to post about the case. Now, she said it was kind of some comedian making a joke
all the jurors gonna lie and pretend like they never heard of Diddy. They don't listen to rap music. They don't listen to watch movies. They can get on this case because if you get on this case, oh, you're gonna make so much money after it's over with writing your book. So they lie. You have to take a lot of detective tests to get on this motherfucking jury, pretend like you don't know who Diddy is.
Spoke about the baby oil, and she was adamant inside that courtroom today that she found it pretty funny, which is, I couldn't see Diddy's face whenever the baby oil or anything like that was mentioned, but he sat there kind of, taking it all in. From what I could see from him, he kind of had no reaction from what I saw, but she was pretty adamant that the post that she saw had to do with baby oil and had to do with Diddy, and she just liked it because, as she says, it was funny. And the judge said that she will proceed as a potential juror in this case.
Yeah, and I saw that there was another juror. By the way, maybe she stole the Elder Wand because it might be excusable, right? It's the most powerful wand in the Harry Potter world. Everybody should know that. But anyway, side note. But I know there was another juror that sued the Port Authority for an injury. They hurt their back on an escalator. They ended up settling that. There's also a question about insurance fraud. You had another juror who says that their uncle was charged with raping someone else, another family member. So it's interesting to hear about their past legal connections. But talk to me now about what did the jurors say about their exposure to the case? So other than the fact they might know celebrities or places, talk to me about what they've seen about the case, whether that was documentaries, whether or not that was evidence that has been released so far in this case. What did we learn about what the jurors' exposure to the Sean Diddy Combs criminal case has been so far?
Yeah, it seemed like it really kind of varied. Some people have seen the documentary, that either being on HBO, The Fall of Diddy, or if they've seen the one on Peacock as well too. Not very much mentioned about BBC or anything like that. But as far as just other mentions of what they have learned about the case probably beforehand was just water cooler talk, at the office. One woman said she actually works at HBO, and she was saying that, people have chatted about the case. Now, she says her job in particular didn't have anything to do with the documentary or anything like that. She was just pretty much a photo producer, so she had no kind of ties into the documentary or anything like that. But it seems like a lot of people were kind of familiar with the case, whether it be, them seeing the CNN video, which obviously we'll see in trial, the raw version or whatever they were able to piece together the government was, and showing that in real time, or real speed, I should say. Some people, again, were familiar with the documentary. Others were familiar just by his arrest. Now, whether or not they knew he had been detained this entire time, that part was a little bit unclear. But as far as the exposure to the case, a lot of people, and I say a lot of people, actually, it kind of just varied, really. Like some people were in the know about it, others weren't so much. But for the most part, there weren't too many who said that they couldn't be fair and impartial just because they, for example, saw the CNN video. One prospective juror said that she had empathy, but she said that she could also be able to kind of listen to the facts, listen to the evidence. And then some even saying that, maybe it doesn't show the entire picture and all of that sort. And so, I was actually kind of surprised at how many people were familiar with this case, given that they might have to become prospective jurors now.
And by the way, real quick, Elizabeth, certain jurors, and I'm going to ask you about this, is they were asked about whether or not they were sexually assaulted or harassed, either them or somebody close to them. And talk to me about what you learned of their responses. And also, did they have to provide that information in a separate room for privacy reasons? Because obviously talking about sensitive material like this in front of an entire courtroom of people could be difficult. What safeguards were put in place by the court to ask those questions? And from what you heard, what were some of the responses regarding their experience with sexual assault or harassment of any kind?
So as far as some of those really personal questions, I was honestly surprised at how many were forthcoming about talking about it in open court. The press is inside that courtroom. A bunch of attorneys are inside that courtroom, either for the government or for the defense. There are some family members in there. So I was surprised at how many people were forthcoming about talking about either previous sexual abuse. Some talked about molestation. Others talked about being fondled by somebody who was older than them when they were teenagers. So these very sensitive topics. But then there was one juror who, did take it up at a sidebar. And kind of how that works is the judge will ask the question, have you had any prior experience with sexual abuse? And do you feel comfortable talking about this, or would you prefer to do it in a more private manner? So instead of taking them even outside of the courtroom or even into the judge's chambers or anything like that, what they all did, well, not all of them, it's too many lawyers for all of them to kind of rush up there. But what they did was 2 lawyers from each side. So it's going to be 2 people from the defense, 2 people from the government, the court reporter, the judge. And I think the judge's clerk was in that kind of huddle as well, too. And they just kind of spoke honestly and candidly while there's kind of this static going on in the courtroom. But the thing is that Diddy himself can kind of see the live transcript of what is being talked about from this prospective juror. So although we as the press can't hear what they are talking about or what these answers are, Diddy can kind of see a live transcription of it from inside, or not from inside, but from at the defense table, where there's kind of a big computer set up and all the live transcriptions kind of going through that. So he can see the answers. So that kind of took care of the logistical issue, because at first they were talking about kind of sealing the answers, then kind of having it separate. And it would be too much, that it would take up too much time. But it seems like the method at which they're going is working out for both sides. They go up, it doesn't take maybe more than about 2 minutes or so. They come back down. The judge will either keep the juror or dismiss the juror. And in this particular case, this juror who went over to the sidebar, she was dismissed for cause. And so that's kind of how they were able to kind of work around this entire situation. And it seems to be going pretty smoothly from both ends. I don't see too many complaints from either side on how this process is really going.
Let me add a little bit of legal context to that. So first of all, I would imagine that Combs has a right to see the transcript, right? Sixth Amendment right, public trial, due process right. So he has an ability to be there during the jury selection process in his own criminal case. It is interesting when we talk about this jury selection process, because we're not saying jurors were selected today to officially be on the trial. They've moved, or certain jurors have moved through the first stage of the process. Now, they can be stricken for cause. So a specific reason why they cannot serve on this jury, a legitimate reason. Now, that's different from later on, when both sides, generally speaking, the prosecution and the defense, will have the option to put forward preemptory challenges. So both sides are typically granted a certain number of preemptory challenges where they can strike a potential juror without even providing a reason. And that's very advantageous for both the prosecution and the defense. But Elizabeth, moving on from today so far, based on Judge Subramanian, who's the first guard to determine whether or not a juror can be stricken for cause, generally speaking, what did you make of his decision-making today? I mean, did he excuse a lot of jurors? Did he excuse maybe more jurors that were favored by the defense over the prosecution? Because I'll tell you, I know there was one juror, for example, who had apparently been watching the HBO documentary on Diddy. The prosecution was concerned about this juror, and the defense wasn't concerned, but the judge ended up excluding that juror nonetheless. So from what you could see on day one, were there a lot of jurors excused? Did it seem that more of the defense's preferences for jurors were excused, maybe more of the prosecution's? And where are we right now? I mean, do you believe that we're actually going to get a jury seated in a week?
I kind of hold my breath a little bit on whether or not we'll actually seat an entire jury this week, but we'll see. You never know what can happen. I'm still in shock that we're even about to go on trial next week. So, don't take my word for it necessarily. But as far as the judge kind of dismissing jurors or keeping jurors, I was surprised at the amount of jurors that he kind of held on to today. To your point, Jesse, just kind of about this one juror, who had seen the documentary, or even one juror I found interesting. She was the one with the ocular migraine. She says it happens only about a few times a year. She says she needs like about 20, 30 minutes. And I was kind of surprised that the judge had kept her on because, she was also the one to kind of talk about how a dentist who she had worked under was previously inappropriate with her when she was a teenager and all of that sort. And yet the judge decided to keep her on. And there was one moment that Diddy, I could tell, wasn't too fond of this particular juror. I shouldn't say too fond, but you could tell that he didn't seem like he had necessarily wanted her as a part of the juror, and that was that HBO photo producer. And so she had talked about, she also kind of talked about, her previous history when it came to molestation in her family. It was by a cousin, and it was done to her and her sister. She says she can feel empathy, but also be fair and impartial. But she did particularly point out that she called the CNN video disturbing and unsettling to watch, but she said that she could listen to all of the facts, and she was also the one who kind of had talked about, the water cooler talk at the office, mainly about Diddy and his case, that type of sort. But defense did bring up that HBO documentary, but the government said that she shouldn't be excused. And so it seems like for now, she'll be staying on as a prospective juror. But as far as just other jurors that were released, they were released either because they had time constraints. One juror, he just started a job like last week. So him being tied to a 2-month trial, the judge was like, okay, we're going to dismiss you and you're good to go. The other juror that was brought in for that sequestered question, but in the form of a sidebar in open court, that type of thing, she was excused for cause. Then the last juror I was in before I had to come out and do the hit with you, she was kind of talking about how she had watched the documentary, but she kind of had a lot of long pauses when the judge would ask her follow-up questions just about whether or not she could be fair and impartial, when particularly or possibly you could see one of the people who did, either analysis or did speak to the documentary, that they could possibly be the ones to testify. And when the judge asked her, can you put away the documentary and actually listen to the facts of the case and listen to this witness testimony in the trial, she kind of had these long pauses and that sort. And so the government was just like, Your Honor, I'm a little worried about this. The defense, they kind of agreed. And so she was another one who was going to be dismissed for cause and that type of sort. But as far as the amount of dismissals over the ones that are being kept, it looks like the ones that are being kept is kind of outnumbering that. So what will that mean for tomorrow, when possibly some of them either have to return, and then that new batch is coming in as well too, because they're trying to guesstimate around a little more than 50 a day. And so that's a lot of prospective jurors in the potential pool. But really quickly, Jesse, I kind of want to talk about just the demographics of these prospective jurors that I saw inside the courtroom. I was honestly surprised at how diverse this group was. I didn't see a lot of younger faces, or maybe, they possibly were, but I couldn't tell. But it didn't seem like there was any type of issue getting a diverse juror or prospective jurors or anything like that. Again, they come from all different walks of life. They are all different ages, all different races. I will say I didn't see as many white men prospective jurors today, but that could be completely different for tomorrow. But I was pretty surprised at how diverse everyone is, because, when I go into that courtroom, I'm just seeing a bunch of lawyers. I'm seeing Diddy. I'm seeing other members of the press. But really, you could tell that these were the people of New York. These are the people who are going to ultimately have to decide and judge whether or not Diddy is guilty of the charges that he faces or whether he's not. So we'll see what all happens with that. But again, a very, very diverse pool of jurors there, or prospective jurors.
And let me tell you, this is not an easy case to sit on. Put aside the fact that you're dealing with the celebrity factor and a lot of eyeballs are on it, maybe a lot of pressure for this verdict, and 8 weeks, the hardship this might have. This is a complicated legal case. So when I heard a potential juror to say today, I don't really understand why it's the United States versus Sean Combs, as opposed to maybe a private individual going after Sean Combs. That's a little concerning. Now, we cover legal cases all the time. It might seem second place to us, but even reading the indictment, when I go through the specifics of racketeering or the specifics of sex trafficking, it's very complicated. That might work to the benefit of the defense. Maybe it works to the benefit of the prosecution. We shall see. But I'm very curious to see if you can have jurors who will actually fully, and this is not a slight on any potential jurors. It's just, this is a complicated case. And I wonder if they're going to be able to fully grasp and recognize and understand what the elements are of these crimes and what they're supposed to do. It's not an easy case, which brings me to my final question before I let you go, Elizabeth. From the best you could see, did the jurors, the prospective jurors, did they look nervous? Did they seem nervous? Did they seem concerned about being there, being a part of such a monumental case?
Not really, which is kind of surprising in the sense because when the jurors were kind of brought in and they were all brought in together, some were in the gallery, some were actually in the jury box, Diddy and his defense team are facing all of them, which to me, I would feel a little intimidated by. But to me, a lot of these jurors just looked at Diddy as if he was just any other person who possibly or who is going to be facing these types of criminal charges. Now, whether or not inside their minds, they're like, oh my God, that's Diddy. That's unclear. Obviously, I can't get inside all of these prospective jurors' minds or anything like that. But there was no noticeable reaction from what I saw. Now, I was kind of in the back on the right-hand side of the courtroom and that sort. But I feel like the jurors were more kind of conflicted just about having to spend what could be 2 months on this jury. I think they were more kind of pressed about that than actually who the defendant was. So from what I could tell, everyone seemed up to the task, or if they weren't up to the task, they were very vocal about that. But as far as just kind of, this possible wow factor or the celebrity factor by seeing Diddy inside the courtroom, nothing that I could tell from being inside there. But who knows, maybe inside their minds, they were thinking something completely different. But again, as far as what I could tell, I feel like a lot of jurors were more kind of worried about the time length of this trial as opposed to who the superstar defendant is.
Elizabeth Milner, great reporting. Day 2 of jury selection in one of the most high-profile trials in recent memory. Sean Diddy Combs is facing federal charges of racketeering and sex trafficking, and right now, his team and federal prosecutors are trying to figure out which New Yorkers will serve on a jury to determine his guilt or innocence. Who may be ultimately selected to decide one of the most impactful criminal trials in recent years? We're going to break down the big moments that happened today. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law and Crime legal alert. So lawsuits allege that antacid use has been linked to increases in stomach cancer and gastric cancer. If you or a loved one were diagnosed with stomach cancer or gastric cancer after using an antacid, you may qualify for compensation. And one of our legal sponsors is partnering with the Driscoll firm, a national firm, helping those injured to ensure their claims are thoroughly presented. Visit antacidclaims.com/sidebar or scan the QR code on screen to answer less than 10 questions and check your eligibility to file a claim. Sean Diddy Combs was back in court today alongside his huge team of high-powered lawyers for day 2 of jury selection. The name of the game is to go through over 100 potential jurors in the next few days, whittle that number down to about 45 or so, and then the defense and prosecution will use strikes and challenges to get that number down to 12 jurors and 6 alternates. And by the way, in case this is a shocker, this is no easy task for these potential jurors, right? Sitting on one of the most impactful, heavily covered criminal trials in years, currently scheduled for 8 weeks. So we're going to cover what has happened today in the process, who may be selected ultimately for this jury. And this comes as not only Combs has just added another lawyer to his team, while the prosecution objected to another one sitting with him. We're going to talk about that. But this also comes as Combs reportedly said yesterday, he's a little nervous. And that's understandable because why? He's facing 5 federal charges. The disgraced music mogul is accused of running a criminal enterprise that was allegedly focused on his sexual needs and desires, hiring sex workers, procuring drugs and baby oil, setting up hotel rooms for elaborate sex parties called freak-offs. And we expect multiple alleged victims, including Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, to testify that they felt forced or coerced to participate in these sexual episodes. Racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. These are the charges. Potentially life in prison if he's convicted. The stakes couldn't be higher. Now, Combs has been behind bars at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, since his arrest last fall. He was denied bail multiple times. Sidebar has been closely following this case even before his arrest. Okay, we were covering when he was first hit with the civil lawsuits, but we covered it every step of the way, right? The raids on his properties in Miami and Los Angeles, his arrest, his indictment, the multiple superseding indictments, and all of the pretrial motions along the way. And we will continue to follow this case for you every step of the way, including when opening statements begin, currently scheduled for next week. We're going to cover every second of this. Now, to talk about what happened today, day 2 of jury selection, to talk about today's proceedings, I want to bring in former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani to talk more about this. Nima, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Love having you on to talk about the Sean Combs case. So first of all, the process has been running quite smoothly and efficiently. I mean, do you think they can select a jury this week with opening statements next week? When you told me this, when they told me that jury selection was only going to take a week, I said, no way, it's not going to be able to take a week. But you think it's possible, generally speaking? We'll get into more specifics about what happened today.
Jesse, first of all, love being on, and we're almost there. Next week, I do believe we are going to get a jury selected this week. And I think the reason we are, really there's 2 reasons. One, we're in federal court, and we know these federal judges like to move. They're really limited when it comes to what they perceive as for-cause challenges. If some of these potential jurors say, hey, I can be fair and impartial, that's good enough for most judges. And they'll say, you know what, counsel, you got to use your peremptory on them. The other reason I think we're moving quickly is because we're having judge voir dire as opposed to attorney voir dire. Attorneys can ask all sorts of questions because, look, let's be honest, Jesse, there's only one person in that courtroom that wants a fair and impartial jury, and that's Judge Subramanian. The lawyers, they're going to want jurors who are favorable for their case. I mean, that they're advocates. That's just the reality of it. So lawyers tend to be a little bit more
What did you say? What? They don't want fair and impartial. They want jurors on their side. Nima, what are you talking about?
Believe it or not, Jesse, advocates actually want to win. So, they'll ask questions, as trying to get into their political beliefs. And really, we want to know, if you're prosecuting or defending a sexual assault case, what are your views on sexual assault? Do you believe it can be underreported? Do you believe it can be falsely reported? Is this rape? Is this regret? I mean, we know what the lawyers are getting after. So the judge obviously isn't going to get into all that. It's going to kind of stay within the boundaries of really what should be a for-cause challenge. And that's why I think the process is moving a lot faster than it would otherwise go.
So let's get into a little bit later on about preemptory challenges and how that's going to work. But right now, as these jurors were brought in for initial questionnaires last week where they filled out all the paperwork, answered questions, now there's individual questioning, and they can be stricken for cause. There's a legitimate reason they can't sit on the jury, whether it's a very unique particular hardship or they're showing some sort of bias. And I have to tell you, Nima, there was a little bit of trouble today, right? You had one prospective juror today who talked about hearing about the Combs case on CNN, admitted that they leaned in a negative light towards him having committed some crimes. That juror was excluded. You had another juror who admitted on the questionnaire, again, that all these prospective jurors had to fill out, that she was a victim of an attempted rape. Reportedly said the cops could have done a lot more. But this juror wrote on the questionnaire that P. Diddy has money and he could buy his way out. And when asked by the court, well, what did you mean by that? She apparently doubled down and said, just what I wrote. She was excused for cause. Another juror who has a son that works in the DA's office of Rockland County, New York, conceded they aren't sure if they could be fair and can't promise they wouldn't be biased. Struck for cause. Another juror who admitted they would be biased for law enforcement, struck from this jury. Nima, I got to say, this is what I anticipated would happen. Now, first of all, credit to these prospective jurors for being honest or purportedly being honest, but I expected we would have a lot of people that would show a sense of bias in this case.
I think that's right, Jesse. First of all, in any case, there are a lot of people that just want to get off jury duty, right? They get that summons in the mail and they don't want to be there, especially for a 2-month trial. That's going to get a lot of press, and not just attention here, international attention. Now, you have some stealth jurors that maybe want to get on this panel and write a book about it and go on the talk show circuit after this is all said and done. But most Americans aren't really excited to serve as jurors. So you'll get folks that will say anything to get off the panel. Now we're talking about a celebrity, and we're talking about sexual assault, and we know that a lot of people have been victims of sexual assault or sexual abuse. So this may hit close to home, and they might not be good jurors on this type of case. And like you said, they may be honest about their experience, not because they want to get off the panel, but because this may be triggering, and they may have to relive through trauma that they themselves have experienced or a loved one has experienced because of sexual assault. So those jurors are also getting off. But like you said, this is the type of case that is going to stir up a lot of emotions from a lot of different folks, whether it's race, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's gender and sexual violence, you name it. This case has it.
And look, these are jurors who have to expect to not only know who Sean Combs is, but they're probably been exposed in the last year and a half to material about him. So whether it's the lawsuits, the CNN video, things like that, they've already formed an opinion about it. So aside from the jurors who, by the way, who mentioned or exhibit signs of bias, you also had other jurors who have conflicts or have medical issues that struck them from the jury too. For example, you had one female juror who expressed she has these stomach issues, needs multiple bathroom breaks, struck from the jury. That's not going to work when, you have prolonged testimony and maybe not the ability to have multiple bathroom breaks and is going to be distracted. But we have another issue, another juror, actually, to be more specific, that highlights a key issue in this case. The footage from the LA Intercontinental Hotel of Combs purportedly beating up Cassandra Ventura back in 2016. Key piece of evidence in this case. Combs issued an apology on Instagram when a portion of that video was published by CNN last year. This was before his arrest. And again, we believe this is going to be a key piece of evidence for the prosecution to establish that Ventura, who we believe is victim one in this case, was trying to escape a freak-off, that there was a sex worker in the hotel room, i.e., this is evidence of sex trafficking. At least that's the argument to be put forward by the prosecution. Well, what happened? You got a juror today who reportedly told the court, yeah, they saw the video. And despite this juror saying they could be fair in court, saying that in the court today on the questionnaire that this juror filled out, apparently the juror wrote they were unsure if they could be fair. But the juror said they would listen to the court's instructions on this. Nonetheless, the juror was excluded. But Nima, this tape, so problematic for jury selection, right?
No question, because like you said, typically when you walk into that courtroom, you haven't seen the evidence in the case, but this is not your ordinary case. Everyone has heard about Sean Combs. Everyone has seen that video. It's disturbing. It is offensive. Like you said, he's holding his towel with one hand. He's beating her as she's trying to leave. How can you not form an opinion? So you have jurors that generally have views on these issues. Then they're bringing their preconceived beliefs about the case because they've all seen the video. And this is one of those unicorn type cases that everyone has already heard about. And there's video evidence. And I expect there to be even more video evidence in the case. So whether it's a case like this or Luigi Mangione, we've all seen the video, Brian Koberger with the bathroom selfie. The jurors that walk into that courtroom, they're going to have prejudged the evidence. So if they say that they can't be fair and impartial either in their questionnaire or an open court, it may be hard for the lawyers to rehabilitate them, right? Because if you're a lawyer in the case and you think it's a bad juror for the other side, you're going to want to try to make them seem fair and impartial to force the other side to use one of their peremptories, not give them excuse for cause, because of course, cause challenges are unlimited.
And we're going to talk about preemptory. I promise anybody who's interested in it, we're going to get to in a second. But as a former prosecutor, I wonder if the prosecution is not happy about that tape being published by CNN. Could you imagine if jurors saw it for the very first time at trial? And by the way, the defense tried in pretrial motions to get that tape or a version of that tape or any footage stricken. They didn't want the jurors to see that footage, but a version is going to be shown to them, or multiple versions in different camera angles is going to be shown. But as a prosecutor, do you think that they are like, oh my gosh, I wish that tape didn't come in, we're having trouble finding a jury? Or because you're so cynical about jury selection, Nima? Do you think the prosecution's like, we're happy that tape came out, and I hope we get jurors who have formed an opinion. They're just not admitting it during jury selection?
I think it's the latter. I get it why you want jurors who haven't seen the video, but it's such a disturbing video. And just you and I have talked about it. If you guys are watching, go back and watch Jesse's videos when this came out in May of last year. It's such a powerful video. It was such a powerful video that after denying these allegations for months and months and months, from November 2023, when Cassie filed their lawsuit, Diddy's homes are raided in March. Only in May, when this video comes out, Diddy issues an apology. That's how powerful the video is. So the cynic in me, if I'm the prosecution, I like to overwhelm the defense, and I like the jurors to basically be on my side before the defense even presents their case. I want them to have made up their minds. And when you have a powerful video like this, if I'm the prosecution, I like it out there. I know it can potentially taint the jury pool. And this is me as an advocate, not for someone who's looking for, the fair and just result. The fair and just result is everyone walks in with a blank slate, right? They view only the evidence in the courtroom. But that's just not the reality in a high-profile case like this. That's why, Jesse, there's always the courtroom, but there's the court of public opinion, and the latter does matter.
And you said it very well. We don't know what other videos might be shown. If you take the defense's perspective, I mean, they made an argument in a pretrial motion that the warrants were invalid in this case because they said if the judge who authorized these warrants, if the magistrate court authorized this warrant, saw all the video footage, they would say, wait a minute, I don't see anything illegal here. I think this is all consensual activity, whatever these sex acts that were captured on video. So it'll be interesting to see what is shown and which side it ultimately benefits. But going back to jury selection today, so you had another juror who apparently read an article about the jury selection process going home from the courthouse yesterday, more specifically, who got excluded from jury service. They were looking to see who got excluded from jury service. Now, the judge today admonished this person, saying they weren't supposed to do that. And apparently the reporting indicates this might have been a lawyer or someone who was trained as a lawyer. If true, you definitely know you shouldn't do this. The court struck this juror, but Nima, it raises a larger question of how tough is it going to be to make sure whoever's impaneled on this jury doesn't talk about the case, doesn't research the case, isn't affected by the media coverage of it, or who's outside the courthouse. That's why I feel like you need so many alternates.
It's really a big problem, Jesse, and technology has just changed the game, right? Back in the day, you weren't getting all your news from your cell phone, right? You have to go home, you got to turn on the TV and watch the news. But we've seen it time and time again, and it's becoming an increasing problem where a juror is Googling about the case, they're on social media, and you're not supposed to bring in those outside facts and evidence into the courtroom. And like you said, a lawyer should absolutely know better. That's not what you're supposed to do. And that's how mistrials happen. So big issue right now. Now, how do you get around it? You sequester the jury. But again, people already don't want to serve as jurors. Now you got to take their cell phones, confiscate them, separate them from their loved ones for 2 months. It's really a big imposition and a burden. So if you're the judge, you're hoping the jurors follow your instructions, whether they're on the panel or potential jurors, so you don't have this problem. But it's a continuing problem because, of course, jurors have lives outside of that courtroom.
So, Nima, let's talk a little bit more about who made it through. So it's been reported that 19 prospective jurors made it through day one yesterday. And today you had other jurors who made it through. And by that, what I mean is, and to be clear, these are not necessarily jurors who are going to ultimately sit on the jury. They are making up that panel of 45 or so jurors who then both the prosecution and the defense will strike and get down to the number of 12 jurors and 6 alternates. Again, I'll get to that a little bit more. But who made it through today? So you had one juror who made it through that was a student of psychiatry, is at Mount Sinai in surgical pathology, served as an expert witness in medical malpractice cases, indicated his son was beat up and had his cell phone stolen while in college, and was told that the crime was committed by 3 young black men. Both sides agreed, and so did the court, not to strike this juror. You have another potential juror who made it through, someone who says they may be an elected officer to a union. His wife, according to him, was molested by a family member. And while he said he saw the CNN video, the Cassie video, and claimed that Diddy looked angry and hostile and entitled. He said he could be fair. You had another juror who claimed that he would lose 30% of his income if he had to serve on an 8-week trial, but indicated he could survive it. Also told the court that his wife is suing his landlord for repairs. It's important to know of any legal issues they may have. And also claimed that he has friends who have been assaulted. That person moving forward. Another potential juror is a security guard, has seen the Cassie tape, found it disturbing, but indicated could be fair. She was let in. We have a child neglect social worker coming in too. We have another juror who was let in over the prosecution's objection, by the way, who claimed that he had negative interactions with the police, including over stolen sneakers, claimed the police didn't look enough into it. Also said on another occasion, an officer allegedly pushed him during a house party that was being shut down. So, Nima, do you get a sense about what both sides want here in terms of jurors?
I do. Obviously, if you're the defense, you want strong-willed jurors. Ideally, you want someone who's a fan, someone who's skeptical of these types of allegations. This is a gross generalization, but the conventional wisdom in some of these sexual assault cases is you want older, conservative female jurors, people that would not put themselves in that situation. Those are the types of jurors, whether it's a Weinstein or a Cosby type case, might be skeptical of these allegations. I believe the victims, but there are some people when these types of allegations are raised years, sometimes decades later, they don't believe it, or they say, you know what, you decided to voluntarily, associate with a music mogul like Diddy. You were trying to further your career. You were getting paid. This wasn't something that was forced upon you. This wasn't someone that was coerced. This is not sex trafficking. You did the drugs voluntarily. So there's a certain type of profile that the defense lawyers are going to like. And obviously, if you're the prosecution, you don't want those types of jurors. You want people that are going to kind of go along and someone that's going to be more likely to believe the consistent testimony of what you believe. There's multiple victims telling the same story.
And Nima, just because somebody has experience with sexual assault or harassment, or has negative interactions with law enforcement, or has seen a piece of evidence in this case, does it make them automatically disqualified from serving? And that's interesting, right? That might be surprising to people.
Not necessarily. Like you said, if they can convince the court that they can be fair and impartial and compartmentalize and set that episode, set that case apart from this case, and decide the case solely based on the facts and evidence in this case, they're not going to be excused for cause. They're going to be at least on that initial panel.
Now, Nima, to be clear again, this is just the potential jury pool. Everyone I mentioned may not even end up being the actual jurors on this case. What can we expect from preemptory challenges, strikes, and also explain to our viewers what those are exactly?
So we're going through the cause challenge process. Those folks that can't be fair and impartial, or they have a hardship, a financial hardship, or a medical hardship that makes it difficult for them to serve 2 months plus deliberations. Often for these longer trials, you can essentially opt out if you can convince the court that you have some reason. It could be family, it could be professional, that prevents you from serving for so long. Okay, so assuming you're clear that you can be fair and impartial, the parties in any type of civil or criminal case, they get a certain number of peremptories. Those are strikes that they can use for any reason, or really no reason at all, as long as it's not a constitutionally prohibited reason, race, religion, and those sorts of things. So once the cause challenges are done and we have that 45 or so, then the parties start using their peremptories. And each case is different. Typically in a federal case, the defense will get 10, the government usually will get 6, but obviously the judge can modify that as well in each particular case.
Do you think that's going to take a full day? So, for example, let's say they get 45 jurors impaneled by Wednesday. They go to preemptories on Thursday. Should they have a jury selected by Thursday afternoon?
I do. And obviously, the lawyers like to ask all sorts of questions. They'll be going into these jurors' social media, trying to get as much information as they can. The judges asked some of this already. There's a whole industry of jury consultants that do this type of research. They're psychologists. They come, they observe these jurors in the courtroom, how they're dressed, how they're interacting with the court. Are they looking at the defendant? And based on that, they're going to use their strikes on the jurors they think are going to be problematic. And sometimes there's a little bit of gamesmanship. Like maybe you don't like a juror, but you think the prosecution might strike them, or maybe the jurors that are coming up behind them are even worse. So there's a real strategy here when it comes to jury selection as well, especially the use of peremptory.
Now, putting aside the issue of jury selection, before I let you go, there's another issue I want to talk to you about since we last broadcast our previous sidebar. So first, as Law and Crime's Elizabeth Milner reported to us yesterday, famed celebrity criminal defense attorney Mark Geragos was in court yesterday. And what happened today? The prosecution filed a letter with the court today objecting to this, saying that it appeared the defense was consulting with Mr. Geragos and members of his law firm, but they apparently never filed a notice to appear in the case. They also argue that according to the local rules, a lawyer or firm, quote, associated with the defense can't make out-of-court statements that would interfere with the trial. And they cite how Geragos has been talking about the case as recently as a few days ago on his podcast. Let's start there, Nima. Fair argument. Should he be prevented from talking about this? Should he have to notify his appearance in court?
If he's going to do any legal work in the case, you have to file a notice of appearance. If you're not admitted before the court or the state, you have to have someone do your pro hoc vice application. Now, if he's just there as a jury consultant, they don't obviously need to notice onto the case. They don't have to be lawyers. But if you are doing legal work, you do have to be in the case. And we know the Southern District of New York has some pretty strict local rules when it comes to these out-of-court statements. We've talked about it in the Lively Baldoni case, for instance, came up in the Mayor Eric Adams case. You really got to be careful about what you say. Luigi Mangione in the federal case, you really got to be careful about what you say in the Southern District of New York, right? Because again, those local rules there really are limiting in what you can say out of court if it has the potential of tainting that jury pool.
Yeah. And by the way, one more point about lawyers. So Nima, also, as reported by Elizabeth previously, today we got official word that Nicole Westmoreland is now representing Combs at this trial too. So he already had several attorneys, Mark Agnifilo, Tenny Geragos, Brian Steele, expanding the team. What do you make of this?
I think it's important, and we've talked about it time and time again. The person that's going to likely cross-examine these female victims is going to be a female. If you have an overbearing male, it can be problematic. You know, we've seen it with Amber Heard, for instance, right? Camille Vasquez handled that cross-examination. So again, this is conventional wisdom. I'm not saying a man can't cross-examine a woman. I'm just saying what is typically done by the defense bar. So I'm not surprised we're adding some female lawyers. And of course, we know the prosecution team is all female as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, at the time of this recording, they are finishing up day 2 of jury selection. I will be very curious to see what happens on day 3. We plan to cover it more here on Sidebar. Nima Rahmani, thank you so much for taking the time. It was great seeing you.
Great seeing you, Jesse. Excited to be on real soon next week.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please
very specific detail. I am going to put that part at the very front. This is so important to the case that I can't risk people not getting to minute like 17 or whatnot when I discovered this. But what I discovered during the filming of this video is that the lead prosecutor for this case, do you guys know who it is? Because I never knew who it was. It's James Comey's daughter, okay? Maureen Comey. Do you understand why that's such a big deal? Okay? Do you guys have any idea who she is and what other cases that she was responsible for prosecuting? One in particular, okay? She was the lead prosecutor on the Ghislaine Maxwell case. She's the daughter of James Comey from the FBI. Remember the director of the FBI, deep state, right in the dead center of this huge, thing to potentially do this and that or the other. We're not going to talk about that in this video. But if you see Maureen Comey involved in the case, then you know that there are very powerful people who are pulling these strings. Because why do you think that they had her prosecute the Ghislaine Maxwell case? You know, why her? It's because she can be trusted to prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell without letting the case sprawl and bring in any of these very prominent people who are involved with Epstein, okay? That's why you have her prosecute that case. Now, does that sound familiar at all when we're talking about the Diddy case? You have Diddy involved in a RICO trial where he's the one defendant on trial for a racketeer, influence, corrupt organizations act. Oh, it's an organization, but he's the only defendant. And you know that you have all of these accusations. You have all of these very prominent people who might have been participating in this stuff, but somehow none of them are on trial. And they've limited the scope of this trial to this Cassie thing and to like a handful of very small crimes. And I'm going to be honest with you, as you're going to see, as you get through this video and we talk about the witness and all of the other stuff about the case, my opinion prior to knowing that was, I don't know if this is I don't know how legit this case is because we've heard about all of this horrific stuff that Diddy's done. Why is none of it in the indictment? And now my opinion is very different. I think that most of the stuff we heard is probably true. And the reason that it's not in the indictment is because they are intentionally trying to silo this entire case to Diddy alone. And the reason for that, we've talked about a million times, I'll talk about it again later in the video, is because he sued Diageo under false pretenses. He claimed that they were racist and he cost them $22 billion in market cap. BlackRock and Vanguard, two of the largest shareholders in that company, do not play. You want to know what you get when you do a thing like that? You get put in prison and you have everything that you have, everything you value taken from you. And the way that you can do that without hurting anyone that you don't want to hurt, because these are valuable assets. All of these entertainers that hang around Diddy are very valuable assets to them. Okay. The way that you do that is you have someone prosecute the case that you know is on the inside with you, understands the game, and is going to limit the scope and put only the person that they want in prison in prison. Okay. So I'm putting this at the very beginning of the video because, again, you will see, I don't know how I didn't know this. I had no idea that Comey was prosecuting this case. You could say, wow, how did you not? If everybody knew that and I was the only one who didn't know, feel free to tell me in the comments that I was unresearched, under-researched, whatever. But you can at least say that the second that I found that out, I put a lot of dots together I'm telling you them in the first 4 minutes of this video. So buckle up because there's a lot of details about the first couple of days of its case that we are going to go over. And that's probably the biggest one of all. All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back. So we are through a day and a half of the Diddy trial, and we are going to do some updates because we have big stories coming out of the case. I wanted to wait, give it a full day so that I had a lot of stories to give you guys, and I do have a lot of stories. The big headline one is that we have a bunch of A-list celebrities that have been named in the jury selection. They're asking the jury, hey, do you know who this person is? This person is, this person is. They're talking about Michael B. Jordan, Kanye West, Kid Cudi, Mike Myers, other people. And we're going to talk about why those names are going to be called, because there's two of them specifically that we basically know exactly why they're being covered or going to be called. And those are not good for Diddy at all. And here's the thing. I'm also going to give you guys, as we go, kind of my opinion of how the trial's going. But we also have another really big story. And this is probably the biggest story of all, which is that one of the key witnesses against Diddy has pulled out. She's like, I'm not going to participate. So there aren't that many witnesses. There aren't that many charges in this case. And that's one of the things that I also want to talk about today, because this is kind of this is going to be the very first video covering the actual trial. And so we're going to go in depth because I'm going to be covering this trial all the way through. But that's a big deal. Okay. You don't have that many witnesses. And one of them already is like, I will not come. I'm not going to testify. Not even if you subpoena me. And you're like, I have no idea, we're not really being clear why, but we'll talk about who that is and what the look of that is. And then also a bunch of other stuff. All right. So we're going to get into it right now. That is what we're going to do. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel if you have not done that yet. I appreciate your guys' ongoing support. Now, if I told you that you could make $50 for free if you take 90 seconds of your time to do something, it's something that you would do, especially if the 90 seconds is going to be something fun, because that's exactly what Prize Picks and I are offering you right now. I want to be very clear. There is no gimmick here. There's no chance where this does not lead to $50 free for you. There's nothing you have to pick right. There's no game you have to win. If you play a $5 roster on Prize Picks, you will get $50 into your account, whether you win or lose the roster that you entered. How much you can win in addition to the automatic $50 depends on the size of the roster that you pick, but I'll let you play around with that a little bit. Now, you also could try to win real big and play more than $5, but you don't have to. Take a look over here. Look at what I stand to win if I hit this roster. Hold me accountable to this. I'm putting it on my channel. I'm putting my face on it. Hold me accountable, and also hold me accountable to this. This game is super fun. You're going to want to play. As you can see on the left side of the screen, all you do is go through the athletes that you want to pick in a specific sport. In this case, we're doing UFC because my girl Rose Namajunas is fighting on Saturday. In addition to MMA, they have college basketball, college football, NBA, NFL, any sport you could think of, you can play on Prize Picks. Now, in the roster you see over here, this is obviously a UFC roster. I'm playing a $5 game, which means if this was my first game, I would see a free $50 put into my account the second that the game starts. So come join me for Prize Picks. It's an amazing game. You'll be supporting my channel and you'll be getting free money. Also, look at my roster, take a screenshot, and then you can see how I did. And also, I want to know who you guys are picking. Send me your rosters if you want. Link is in the description. Use promo code JesseOnFire for the $50 bonus. And that is what it is. All right, here we go. The beginning of a long saga that is going to dictate whether or not Diddy ever sees freedom ever again. Okay, so right out of the gate, I want to show you how they're presenting Diddy in court. And by the way, when I say how they're presenting him, that doesn't necessarily mean that any of this is inaccurate or untrue, but they are presenting him as a very kind of like toned down version of Diddy. He's a sober guy. He hasn't dyed his hair, so he has, his white hair, white beard. And, the first thing he said to the judge right here, he says, "I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm a little bit nervous today." He's trying to be likable. He's trying to be calm. And that is going to be key to his defense because there's going to be a lot of things said about him, obviously. So they say that he wore a blue button-down sweater. A blue sweater over a white button-down shirt, sat at the defense table observing jury selection. And listen, dude, his life is on the line, right? And it's what's funny about all of this is like, this is the kind of thing that you're hearing in this jury selection process. I've never even heard of a jury selection process for a case like this, but listen, one possible panelist, Juror 20, admitted that she had liked a video on her Instagram page of a comedian poking fun at the 1,000 bottles of baby oil the Fed said they found when they raided Combs's mansion. And she said that she still could judge the case fairly. This is so public. And everyone has seen everything on this unless they literally live in a dungeon, And there was another one. There was another one where they said that this right here. So like the jurors say they've seen the video of the alleged beating and heard all the baby jokes. So they just say jurors say that they have seen the video of the alleged beating and heard the baby oil jokes. And I assume that means all of them. You know what I mean? All of them. Right? Like my parents have seen that video. My parents don't care about pop culture. They don't care about P. Diddy. They've seen the video of him dragging her down the hall and beating her up. That's the one thing is about, I made videos saying that the judge allowing that video to be shown in court was going to be damning to Diddy's case, which I stand by. But even if they wouldn't have allowed it, everybody's seen that thing, and even if they hadn't seen that thing, someone in the jury pool or the majority of them, even if the person hasn't seen it, they're going to be telling them, they're like, listen, I don't care what you think of him. If you haven't seen the video, he is throwing her on the ground. He kicks her. He kicks a girl and then drags her back down the hall like a rag doll. It's unbelievable. Don't tell me you think he's a good guy because we've seen it. Like they're going to get convinced the impact of that video was going to be felt regardless of whether or not people had seen it themselves. Okay. But anyway, so let's move over here and start talking about who the celebrities are and why they're going to be in here. And also just as a high level reminder. Okay. This is the whole thing about this case. And people have said, they're like, it feels like your tone is changing on this case, because you are hard on like Diddy is the worst. He's scum. He's this, he's that. And now it sounds like you're softening up. I'll tell you exactly why I sound like that. Okay. is because I am very sensitive to being manipulated by the media. Okay. Very sensitive to that. So if you tell me that this guy has been assaulting children, right? Like assaulting children. Okay. He's been violently raping women forever, drugging people, all of this stuff, right? Then I expect to see that represented in the court documents, which in what you're charging him with. Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like, so all these people are going public and they're like, yeah, I saw this. Oh, he was doing this with kids. He was doing this, whatever. And then you look at the indictment, you're like, there's literally nothing about kids in this. There's nothing about anything. Like there's no violent assault at all in here. No violent, like grape at all. Where is that stuff? Like, where is all this stuff that we talked about? I'm not saying that it makes me think he's a good dude. I'm not saying that it makes me change my opinion of him. It makes me suspicious of potentially having been manipulated to go so far in the other direction, because why would they not be charging him with this stuff if it was all true? You also have to keep in mind that I am 100% confident about why I believe this is happening to him. And that is because he, while in the partnership with Diageo, which he made hundreds of millions of dollars from his Ciroc partnership, and then was in a 50-50 ownership position on Delano or De Leon tequila, and then he backstabbed them, sued them, and called them racist. And the primary, the largest shareholders are Vanguard and BlackRock. These are the most powerful people in the world. Okay. Now, if you guys have been watching the coverage on Justin Bieber and others recently, we have really been getting an education on how par for the course it is for the power brokers to destroy entertainers if they ever get out of line. Now, Diddy might have thought that he had elevated over what was considered an entertainer that could be destroyed by these people, but he was wrong, okay? Because he went after the really big guys, the absolute biggest guys in the world, and he cost them $22 billion. After Diddy threatened them to burn the house down, call them racist in the lawsuit, when he did that, the stock dropped 20% or something like that. I did the math. It was a $22 billion hit to the market cap, which is the total value of that company. And Diddy did that personally to them. You think they're going to let that slide, those guys? Yes, he won a settlement that was probably, I don't know, $300-400 million, whatever it was. He probably thought he won. But that case, they settled that case with Diageo in January of 2024, and his home got raided in April, like the very first week of April. Okay. You are not going to convince me that that's a coincidence. And then you got the biggest onslaught of media attention on him of all time. And that's because he really bit the hand that fed them. It's not like, Justin Bieber, who wants to get out of his contract. Diddy bit the hand that you never bite. These guys, they will make an example of you. And that's exactly what I believe is happening here. That doesn't mean that Diddy didn't do it. It doesn't mean he's clean on these things. Okay. What it means is that regardless of how crazy any of these accusations are, any of that stuff, like they were going to amplify them. And so I just want to make sure that I'm not just fully being manipulated by a media onslaught versus what's real. Okay. I know he is guilty of many of these things because I've seen the video of him with Cassie and all of that other stuff. But that's why my tone sounds different, is because once I really recognize what had happened, and then I'm looking at the indictment, and there's you're looking literally of the things that they've talked about on television. The indictment represents 3% of the things I've heard about. Because again, what he's charged with is he's charged with one count of sex trafficking. He's charged with one count of racketeering. Now that's the big one though. Okay. That's the really big one, because the racketeering charge can encompass a bunch of other crimes, right? Racketeering is just organized, organized. It's a catch-all for organized crime. Okay. So when we get into anyway, so it's the majority of this case is basically built around the Cassie thing. Okay. Just bottom line, the majority, she is the star witness. Most of this stuff is built around that. There are other witnesses, like I said, that we're going to talk about shortly, but so we're on the same page as we get into who these celebrities are and why it's notable that they're going to be included in the trial. That is very important because they are related to Cassie. Okay. So In the jury selection for Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial began Monday morning in New York as a media circus surrounding the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. 150 potential jurors were asked to fill out questionnaires to gauge their knowledge of Combs, their views on law enforcement, whether they have experienced a sexual assault, and more. They were also given a list of at least 190 people, including celebrities and public figures, that asked to indicate whether they recognized their names. Okay. Among the names on that list were Michael B. Jordan, Kanye West, Mike Myers, and Kid Cudi. It's unclear how the names on the list relate to the Combs trial, if at all. Combs is known to have hosted big Hollywood parties, yada, yada, yada. Okay. But the ones that we do know are related to Cassie are the Kid Cudi one and Michael B. Jordan, because those are the two who dated Cassie. All right. So prosecutors believe that Kid Cudi, for one, is the victim of a car bombing committed by Combs in 2011. During that time, the Pursuit of Happiness rapper was romantically involved with Cassie, longtime ex-girlfriend of Cassandra, Cassie Ventura, the star witness of the federal trial. A source familiar with the case indicated to Variety that Jordan will not be a witness. The actor went on a date with Ventura in 2015, and Combs was said to be upset about it. Here's the thing, though, okay? Like on that car bombing, I'm pretty sure they got him dead to rights on that, you know? Like Diddy said, I'm going to blow up his car. I'm going to blow up his car. And then his car blew up in front of his house. And Kid Cudi verified that happened. All right. And you have Cassie there to testify. And here's the thing about that. Like you always have to be a little bit suspicious of like ex-girlfriends and stuff, but it's like you have a video of him beating her up and dragging her down the hall. You know, like I don't think that there's a whole lot of room to be suspicious of what she says. And certainly not when you have verification that this car bombing did happen and you have verification from multiple people that Diddy threatened it. And then that happened. Right. And that's the thing. That's the kind of thing right there. That's the kind of thing that for most billionaire celebrity rappers, like that doesn't even, to them, I bet you like, they don't even think of that as like a crime, you know? Like, I don't think that they even think of that as like a big deal crime, like blowing up someone's car, because it's like so easy to get away with. And they kind of know like Kid Cudi's he's not going to go to the police about this. He's just going to say message received. Right. Now, one other thing that was very interesting is they say that a surprising number of the potential jurors indicated that they were not familiar with any of the names. Michael B. Jordan, no idea. Michael Myers, no idea. You know, Kid Cudi, it's not that like surprising. They don't know who that is, but like they don't know who, and those are like, you know, some of the really biggest names. They have no idea who any of them were, including all of the other names. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they are, what are they going to, like, what are these two sides looking for? Do they want them to know who these people are and then try to kind of probe underneath what their opinions of these people are? Because to me, I think for me personally, if I'm trying to pick this jury, I think that a total blank slate might not necessarily be the best. I might want people who know who they are if I can get into other things I can ask them to try to understand how they think about them. I feel like you get more insight on how a person might rule based on their opinion of people that you're asking them about versus just, oh yeah, I have no idea who they are. You know, because you know what you're going to know is you're going to know that guy beat up Cassie and dragged her down the hallway. Okay, there's not a lot. Like if you really think about this, you hear about, oh, this guy is accused of hitting this woman, or oh, the police were called on a domestic violence call, and the woman had bruises. Right? It's very, very rare where you actually see with your own eyes a man hurting a girl. If you really think about that, and once you've seen that, I mean, I don't know if people have the same reaction as me, but my instincts to protect like women are overwhelming. Like that would very much cloud my judgment, because basically, I mean, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but I think that once you show me that video, basically anything I'm just going to look at the guy and be like, I don't believe anything that you say. And I'll be really interested to see how the testimony from Cassie goes, because again, two things can be true at once. Like he can be an abusive boyfriend, and he could be a controlling boyfriend who's really scary. And it can also be absolute total horseshit to say that he was sex trafficking her if she was voluntarily participating in a swinger lifestyle. Okay. Maybe he really was just blackmailing her into doing it all along, and she was utterly terrified. And then that certainly could be presented as sex trafficking, and that is what she's going to say. So, like, I don't have my mind made up at all. I really don't on that charge. I'm just saying, like, there is a world where that's a tough one to prove, but we'll see. You know, I think it'll really depend on whether or not they are allowed to see the freak off tapes with Cassie, because depending on her, what's the right way to put this? Depending on how excited she is to be participating, you're going to, it's like you're saying that she's being forced into this. Doesn't really look like that, does it? Looks like she's pretty excited. Diddy looks pretty like uninvolved. Looks like he's just kind of hanging out on his phone, and she is the one who is instigating this. And even if it is under duress, it probably won't look that way, Anyway, all right. So let's talk about the witness. Okay. So prosecutors struggle to secure alleged victims' testimony for Diddy trial. Okay. So that's losing a key witness right there. So prosecutors in the Diddy sex trafficking trial are already feeling pressure after one of their star witnesses said she might not show up to testify. Okay. She's not coming. After jury selection began on Monday, May 5th, the prosecution told the court they struggled to get in touch with one of their anonymous witnesses and her attorney. Here's the other thing. Every other witness in this case, aside from Cassie, is anonymous. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Now, if they're anonymous to the public, that's fine. Like, I don't have any problem with that. But anonymous to the jury? Actually, you know what? I'll just leave it at this. I would personally like clarification on that. Okay? Because if they get to be just straight up Jane Doe's to where like Diddy doesn't even know who it is and all that, it's kind of like, dude, what the anonymous? Like, I don't like anonymous sources in news stories. I certainly don't like anonymous people telling a story if the outcome is going to be sending someone to prison for life. And that's for anybody, even a person who I've seen beat up a girl on video. You know what I mean? So they said the woman doesn't live close to New York and revealed it's possible she won't attend trial even after she was subpoenaed, which means she's backing out. Okay, that's pretty clear. Lead prosecutor Maureen Comey told the judge, oh my God. Lead prosecutor Maureen Comey told the judge she would briefly mention the woman in her opening statements, but wouldn't describe her story until the second half of the trial. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's Comey's daughter who is prosecuting this case. It's Comey's daughter. I did not know that. I did not know that. She is the same person who prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell, who prosecuted, oh my God, that is, you know who James Comey is? Like Deep State 101, James Comey, FBI, who everybody was like, oh my God, in the first, Trump administration, oh my God, Trump fired him. And then you heard about a lot of other stuff and you're like, oh wow, he really was just a straight up Deep State guy. I am blown away by that. I did not realize that Comey's daughter was also prosecuting this case. Wow. Okay. So the prosecution plans to call on at least 3 star witnesses to testify against Sean Diddy Combs. His ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Cassie Ventura, has already committed to testify publicly, while the other 3 alleged victims will remain anonymous. Prosecutors previously indicated that one of the witnesses claimed Combs allegedly forced her to undergo a medical procedure. Okay, well, so either he asked her to get fake boobs, fake ass, or an abortion. I mean, like, this is not rocket science. Like, I'm pretty sure that's probably what it's going to be. It's not clear which witness it is, but the feds claim the procedure was related to the sex trafficking charge. This is what I'm saying. Okay, forced her to get a medical procedure. Okay, so like if a dude who's having sex with a girl makes her get an abortion, that makes it like sex trafficking. I mean, I don't know. Again, like I want to hear this testimony. I want to hear exactly what they're saying so that I can decide whether or not I think these are like legitimate charges. Because, oh my God, especially now that I know that it's Comey's daughter who is prosecuting this, because she is the one who prosecuted the Ghislaine Maxwell case and made sure no one heard any of the names. Okay? No one heard any of the names. This is two stories, two huge cases where you have like a trial where you're putting someone down for sex trafficking, and somehow you don't have a single one of the major names who definitely participated involved in the trial at all. Okay. You don't put that prosecutor in place because you want them to get to the bottom of the crime. You put that prosecutor in place specifically to keep everyone else out of it. Wow, dude. In response, the Combs legal team told prosecutors they needed to inform them about their plans for the alleged victim by the end of the week. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, so bottom line is they lost one of their key witnesses, and man, this entire video has just taken a complete different turn now with the...
Go figure. Follow me.